They remember your reactions more than your words. Some people listen to understand you, others watch to discover how you can be controlled. When someone remembers your emotional reactions more clearly than the words you spoke, they may be studying what affects you rather than caring about what you meant. They notice which questions make you nervous, which jokes make you defensive, which silences make you apologize, and which disappointments make you surrender. While you believe the conversation has ended, they may be storing your reactions as a private map of your emotional pressure points. This signal is difficult to recognize because it can initially resemble attentiveness. They remember that criticism makes you over-explain, distance makes you chase reassurance, and anger makes you abandon your boundaries. Instead of using that knowledge to protect your feelings, they begin using it to shape your behavior. During conflict, they may repeat a phrase that previously unsettled you. When they want attention, they may become cold because they know silence frightens you. When you resist a demand, they may appear disappointed because guilt has worked before. Over time, your reactions teach them which emotional buttons produce the fastest results. The darkest part is that you may start blaming yourself. You think you are too sensitive, too anxious, or too difficult without realizing that someone has learned how to trigger those emotions deliberately. Healthy partners remember your feelings so they can avoid hurting you. Manipulative partners remember them so they can recreate the reaction whenever it becomes useful. Pay attention to what happens after you reveal a vulnerability. Does the person become gentler with it, or does that same weakness mysteriously appear in later arguments? Someone who truly values you will protect the parts of you they understand. Someone seeking control will memorize them. They quietly test which boundaries you defend. A boundary is rarely destroyed in one dramatic moment. More often, it is tested through small actions that seem too minor to confront. Someone may arrive late without explanation, read your private messages, make a joke at your expense, pressure you after you say no, or repeatedly interrupt your personal time. They are not always acting carelessly. Sometimes, they are watching closely to see what you will tolerate. The first test is usually subtle enough to create doubt. You may wonder whether you are overreacting or being too sensitive. If you remain silent, laugh nervously, or forgive the behavior without addressing it, they learn that this boundary is flexible. The next violation becomes slightly larger because your previous response showed them there may be no real consequence. This pattern becomes dangerous when the person respects boundaries only after resistance. They may stop temporarily when confronted, then test the same limit again in a different form. They are measuring whether your no is permanent or simply an obstacle that can be weakened through guilt, persistence, affection, anger, or exhaustion. Healthy people may cross a boundary accidentally, but they listen when corrected. They do not repeatedly search for loopholes. A manipulative person treats your limits like locked doors, testing every handle until one opens. Each unchallenged violation teaches them how far they can move into your emotional space. Pay attention to their reaction when you become firm. Do they respect your decision, or do they mock, debate, punish, or pressure you? The boundary itself often reveals less than their response to it. Someone who values you may feel disappointed, but they will still respect your limits. Someone seeking control will treat your boundary as a challenge to defeat. They share secrets. Early to create false closeness. Deep personal disclosure can feel like trust, but sometimes it is used to create intimacy before real trust has had time to grow. A person may reveal painful memories, family problems, past betrayals, or private fears soon after meeting you. The intensity makes the connection feel rare, almost as if you understand each other on a level others never could. This can create emotional pressure. Once they share something deeply personal, you may feel expected to do the same. You begin revealing your own wounds because withholding them now feels cold or unfair. In reality, closeness built through rushed disclosure can bypass the slower process of observing character, consistency, and respect. The danger is not simply that someone opens up quickly. Some people are naturally expressive or lonely. The real signal appears when early secrets are used to create obligation. They may suggest that you are the only person they trust, that nobody else understands them, or that your bond is already more meaningful than relationships that have existed for years. This emotional speed can weaken your judgment. You may ignore contradictions because the connection feels special. You may excuse disrespect because you know their painful history. You may remain loyal because leaving feels like abandoning someone who trusted you with their darkest experiences. Manipulative people sometimes use vulnerability as a shortcut. They reveal enough pain to appear genuine, then use the closeness to gain access, sympathy, loyalty, or forgiveness. Later, they may treat your own disclosures as emotional leverage. Healthy intimacy develops through time, mutual care, and consistent behavior. Secrets alone do not prove safety. Pay attention to whether the person respects your pace, accepts your privacy, and behaves reliably after the emotional moment passes. Real closeness grows steadily. False closeness often arrives intensely, demands loyalty quickly, and leaves you emotionally committed before you truly know who you are trusting. They ask harmless questions to find your insecurities. Some questions are asked to understand you. Others are asked to discover where you are easiest to hurt. A person may casually ask what you dislike about yourself, what caused your last relationship to end, whether you fear being abandoned, or what criticism affects you most. The conversation feels personal and harmless, but they may be quietly collecting emotional information. These questions often appear during warm, intimate moments when your defenses are lower. Because the person seems curious and caring, you may answer honestly. You reveal that silence makes you anxious. Comparison makes you feel inadequate. Rejection makes you chase reassurance, or criticism makes you work harder for approval. In a healthy relationship, this knowledge creates compassion. Someone who values you becomes more careful with the wounds you trusted them to see, but a manipulative person may store the information and use it later. They may withdraw affection because they know distance unsettles you. They may praise someone else because comparison makes you insecure. They may question your intelligence, appearance, loyalty, or worth precisely because they already know which doubt lives deepest inside you. The darkest part is how natural the process feels. Nothing appears threatening when the questions are first asked. You may even feel relieved that someone wants to know you deeply. The danger becomes visible only when your private fears begin appearing inside arguments, jokes, punishments, or moments when they want control. Pay attention to patterns. Does the person protect what you reveal, or does the same insecurity repeatedly surface when you resist them? Do their questions create understanding, or do they leave you feeling exposed and easier to influence? Real curiosity makes you feel known without making you feel defenseless. Someone who cares about your insecurities will help you feel safer around them. Someone seeking power will learn exactly where to apply pressure. They learn what makes you feel guilty. Guilt can guide healthy behavior, but in the wrong hands, it becomes a powerful method of control. Some people pay close attention to what makes you feel selfish, disloyal, ungrateful, or cruel. They notice whether you struggle to disappoint others, whether you feel responsible for everyone's emotions, and whether saying no leaves you anxious long after the conversation ends. At first, this attention may look like emotional understanding. They learn that you hate seeing people upset, that you fear being viewed as uncaring, or that you often sacrifice your own comfort to keep the peace. Instead of protecting that compassionate side of you, they begin using it whenever they want access, agreement, forgiveness, or attention. They may sigh heavily when you set a boundary. They may remind you of everything they have done for you. They may say that someone who truly cared would make more effort, answer more quickly, cancel their plans, or overlook another betrayal. The request is no longer presented as a choice. It becomes a test of whether you are a good partner. Over time, you may begin obeying before they even apply pressure. You anticipate their disappointment, silence, or accusations and adjust your behavior to avoid feeling guilty. This is how control becomes internal. They no longer need to force you because your fear of hurting them does the work. Healthy partners can express disappointment without attacking your character. They do not make love conditional on constant sacrifice. They allow you to say no without treating it as abandonment. Pay attention when guilt repeatedly appears after reasonable decisions. Are you genuinely correcting harmful behavior, or are you being made to feel cruel for having needs? Someone who respects you may ask for compromise. Someone seeking control will make your conscience punish you until surrender feels easier than standing firm. They copy your interests and values too perfectly. Meeting someone who seems to love everything you love can feel almost unreal. They enjoy the same music, share the same beliefs, dislike the same people, want the same future, and even describe life using language that sounds strangely familiar. The connection feels effortless because there appears to be almost nothing separating you. Sometimes this is genuine compatibility. But when the similarities appear too quickly, too completely, and without any natural disagreement, the person may be mirroring you rather than revealing who they truly are. They study your preferences, opinions, dreams, and emotional needs, then reflect them back in a form designed to feel like destiny. This creates powerful attachment because familiarity feels safe. You begin thinking that you have finally met someone who understands you without explanation. That feeling can lower your caution and make you trust faster than the relationship has earned. The danger becomes clearer when their personality changes around other people. They may suddenly adopt different beliefs, interests, or attitudes depending on who is present. What felt like deep compatibility may have been adaptation. Manipulative people use this perfect alignment to gain closeness, approval, and access. Once trust is established, the copied personality may slowly disappear. They become less supportive, more controlling, or strangely indifferent to the values they once claimed to share. Healthy compatibility still includes individuality. Two people can connect deeply while having separate tastes, opinions, and boundaries. Real closeness does not require one person to become a reflection of the other. Pay attention to whether their interests existed before you arrived. Do they speak about them with real depth or only repeat what you have said? Genuine connection feels mutual. Manufactured connection often feels flawless at first, then confusing once the mirror begins to crack. They change personalities around different people. Everyone adjusts slightly depending on the setting. Most people speak differently with family, friends, co-workers, or strangers. But when someone's entire personality changes depending on who is present, it may reveal something deeper than social flexibility. They may be warm and gentle with you in private, then become dismissive when certain friends appear. Around authority figures, they seem respectful and agreeable. Around people they consider weaker, they become impatient, mocking, or controlling. Their values, opinions, humor, and even voice may shift so dramatically that you begin wondering which version is real. At first, you may excuse it as confidence, charm, or the ability to fit in anywhere. But constant personality changes can be a sign that the person is focused more on managing impressions than living by stable principles. They become whatever each audience rewards. This can make a relationship emotionally confusing. You may receive kindness when they need closeness, distance when they want approval from others, and cruelty when they believe there will be no consequences. Because their behavior changes so quickly, you may keep chasing the version of them that first made you feel safe. The darker pattern appears when they deny these changes. They may insist you misunderstood, accuse you of jealousy, or claim you are too sensitive, yet you repeatedly watch them reshape themselves to gain attention, status, sympathy, or control. Healthy people may adapt their manners, but their core character remains recognizable. Their respect does not disappear when a more powerful person enters the room. Their values do not change based on who can benefit them. Pay attention to how they treat people who offer them nothing. That version often reveals more than the charming personality they carefully perform for those whose approval they want. They help without asking, then expect repayment. Help can feel generous, comforting, and deeply caring. But sometimes assistance is not offered freely. It is given as an unspoken contract you never agreed to. A person may solve a problem, buy something for you, complete a task, or make a sacrifice without asking whether you wanted it. Later, that favor becomes evidence that you owe them access, loyalty, forgiveness, or obedience. At first, their support may make you feel grateful. You may even believe you have found someone unusually thoughtful. The pressure appears later, often during conflict. They remind you of what they did, how much they spent, or what they gave up. Suddenly, the kindness is no longer kindness. It becomes a bill. This pattern is powerful because many people hate appearing ungrateful. The person learns that your gratitude can be turned into guilt. They may expect you to cancel plans, overlook disrespect, return affection, or agree to something uncomfortable because they did so much for you. The darker part is that they may keep helping even after you ask them not to. They create obligations faster than you can refuse them. Each favor gives them another reason to claim you are selfish whenever you resist. Healthy support respects choice. A caring person can offer help without using it to control your future decisions. They do not treat generosity as ownership, and they do not punish you for failing to repay an agreement that was never discussed. Pay attention to how someone behaves when their help does not produce the response they expected. Do they remain kind, or do they become cold, resentful, and accusatory? Genuine generosity gives without secretly purchasing power. Manipulative generosity creates debt first, then waits for the moment when collecting it will benefit them most. They create confusion to make you blame yourself. Confusion can be accidental, but when it becomes a repeated pattern, it may be a form of emotional control. A person may give unclear instructions, change expectations without warning, contradict earlier statements, or deny agreements you believed were settled. When things go wrong, they act as though the problem came from your carelessness, memory, or inability to understand them. At first, you may assume the misunderstanding was innocent. You explain yourself, apologize, and try harder to communicate. But the rules keep changing. What pleased them yesterday annoys them today. A behavior they once encouraged suddenly becomes evidence that you do not listen. Because nothing remains consistent, you begin monitoring yourself constantly, hoping to avoid another mistake. This confusion can slowly damage your confidence. Instead of asking whether the person is being inconsistent, you start wondering whether you are forgetful, difficult, overly emotional, or impossible to satisfy. The more uncertain you become, the easier it is for them to define what happened and decide who is responsible. The darker pattern appears when clarity threatens their control. When you ask direct questions, they avoid answering, introduce unrelated issues, or accuse you of starting an argument. They may leave conversations unfinished, then later claim you agreed to something you never accepted. Healthy relationships can contain misunderstandings, but both people work toward clarity. A respectful partner explains what they mean, acknowledges contradictions, and accepts responsibility for unclear communication. They do not benefit from keeping you disoriented. Pay attention to how you feel after serious conversations. Do you leave with greater understanding, or do you feel mentally exhausted and ashamed without knowing what you actually did wrong? Someone who values you helps resolve confusion. Someone seeking control keeps you uncertain until blaming yourself feels easier than questioning them. They repeatedly ignore preferences that matter to you. Forgetting a small preference once may mean nothing, but when someone repeatedly ignores choices you have clearly expressed, especially the ones tied to your comfort, dignity, or emotional safety, the behavior may reveal more than simple carelessness. They may keep choosing places you dislike, making jokes you asked them to stop, interrupting routines that help you feel settled, or dismissing details that matter deeply to you. Each incident appears minor on its own, which makes confrontation feel difficult. You may worry that speaking up will make you seem demanding. The real warning sign is repetition after clear communication. Once you have explained that something matters, continued disregard becomes a decision. They are showing that your preferences carry less weight than their convenience, amusement, or desire for control. Over time, this can train you to ask for less. You stop mentioning what you enjoy because disappointment feels predictable. You accept uncomfortable situations to avoid arguments. Eventually, you may begin believing that your needs are too complicated, even though the person simply refuses to make room for them. The darker pattern appears when they remember details that benefit them while forgetting yours. They recall what earns your affection, what makes you useful, and what keeps you available, yet somehow overlook the things that would require consideration from them. This selective memory is not always accidental. Healthy partners will not share every preference, but they treat what matters to you with respect. They make reasonable adjustments, communicate when compromise is needed, and show that your comfort deserves consideration. Pay attention to whether your preferences are discussed or routinely erased. Someone who values you may occasionally forget, but they care when reminded. Someone who repeatedly ignores what matters to you may be teaching you that only one person's needs are allowed to shape the relationship. They make emotional promises but avoid commitment. Some people speak about the future with intense emotion but disappear when real commitment requires action. They may tell you that you are different, describe the life they want to build with you, or speak as though the relationship is already permanent. Their words create security, but their behavior remains vague. These promises often arrive during moments when they fear losing you. After conflict, distance, or disappointment, they suddenly become certain about everything. They talk about loyalty, marriage, family, growth, or changing their behavior. The emotion feels sincere because, in that moment, They may genuinely believe what they are saying. The problem begins when the moment passes. Plans remain undefined. Important conversations are delayed. Clear decisions are replaced with soon, when the time is right, or why are you pressuring me? You are given enough hope to stay, but not enough certainty to feel secure. This pattern can keep someone emotionally invested for months or years. You continue waiting because the promises sound meaningful, and leaving feels like giving up just before everything finally changes. Meanwhile, the person receives closeness, loyalty, affection, and patience without accepting the responsibilities that commitment would require. Healthy commitment is not measured by how beautifully someone describes the future. It is revealed through consistency, difficult conversations, practical planning, and decisions that carry real weight. Words matter, but they must eventually become visible behavior. Pay attention to whether emotional promises lead to clear action. Do they make specific plans, keep agreements, and accept accountability, or do their strongest declarations appear only when you begin pulling away? Someone who truly wants a future with you may move carefully, but they move honestly. Someone avoiding commitment may keep painting a beautiful future because the picture itself is enough to keep you from leaving the present. They praise traits that benefit them. Praise can feel like love, especially when it touches the parts of you that rarely receive recognition. But sometimes, a person praises you not because they value who you are, but because certain traits make you easier to use. They may constantly admire how patient, forgiving, loyal, generous, independent, or understanding you are. At first, the compliments feel deeply affirming. You may believe they truly see your character, but over time, the praise begins creating pressure. If you set a boundary, they remind you that you are usually so understanding. If you question their behavior, they say they always admired how trusting you were. If you ask for support, they act surprised because you are supposed to be strong and independent. The compliment becomes a role you are expected to keep performing. You begin tolerating more because you do not want to lose the identity they gave you. Saying no feels selfish. Asking for accountability feels disloyal. Expressing pain feels like failing to be the calm, mature, forgiving person they claim to love. The darker pattern appears when they praise only the traits that reduce their responsibilities. They celebrate your patience, but ignore your ambition. They admire your independence, but never support you. They love your forgiving nature because it allows them to repeat the same harm without consequences. Healthy praise sees the whole person. It does not turn your strengths into obligations. Someone who values you can admire your kindness while still respecting your limits. They do not expect loyalty to replace honesty or patience to replace accountability. Pay attention to what their compliments ask you to become. Do they help you feel appreciated, or do they quietly trap you inside a version of yourself that serves them? Sometimes the sweetest praise is not admiration. It is instruction disguised as affection. They resent your independent choices. A healthy relationship allows two people to remain individuals. But when someone resents your independent choices, even ordinary decisions can begin to feel like betrayal. They may become distant when you make plans without them, question why you need time alone, or react coldly when you choose what suits you instead of what benefits them. At first, their disappointment may look like affection. You may think they simply miss you or want to feel included. The warning sign appears when your independence repeatedly creates tension. A new hobby, friendship, work opportunity, personal goal, or private decision suddenly becomes something you must defend. They may not directly forbid you. Instead, they use silence, guilt, sarcasm, emotional withdrawal, or suspicious questions. You begin noticing that peace returns only when you cancel your plans, change your decision, or place their comfort above your own. Over time, this can make independence feel dangerous. You start asking permission when none should be needed. You share every detail to prevent accusations. You avoid opportunities because you already know the emotional cost of choosing yourself. The darker pattern is not that they want closeness. It is that they interpret your freedom as a loss of control. Your ability to think, choose, grow, and enjoy life without their approval threatens the position they want to hold in your world. Healthy partners may have feelings about your decisions, but they respect your right to make them. They can communicate disappointment without punishing you for having a separate identity. Pay attention to whether your choices are discussed or quietly penalized. Someone who loves you will not require you to become smaller so they can feel secure. Someone who resents your independence may call it distance, selfishness, or disloyalty because your freedom reminds them that you are still capable of choosing a life they do not control. They demand updates while staying vague themselves. Constant updates can look like care, especially when someone says they worry about you, miss you, or simply want to feel included. But when they expect detailed information about your location, plans, company, and timing while remaining vague about their own life, the imbalance may reveal control rather than closeness. They may ask where you are, who you are with, when you will return, and why your plans changed. If you answer slowly or leave out a detail, they become suspicious. Yet when you ask similar questions, their responses are unclear. They say they are busy, out somewhere, handling something, or that you should trust them without needing explanations. This double standard creates emotional confusion. You are expected to prove transparency while they treat transparency as an invasion of privacy. Over time, you may begin reporting your movements automatically, not because you freely want to share, but because you fear the questions, accusations, or tension that follow when you do not. The darker pattern appears when information becomes a tool of supervision. They use your updates to track your routine, question your choices, interrupt your time, or make sure they remain present in every part of your day. Meanwhile, their vagueness protects them from the same accountability they demand from you. Healthy communication is mutual. Partners may share plans for safety, coordination, and connection, but one person should not live under inspection while the other remains hidden. Trust cannot require complete access in only one direction. Pay attention to how they react when you ask for equal openness. Do they answer calmly, or do they accuse you of being controlling, insecure, or dramatic? Someone seeking closeness welcomes fairness. Someone seeking control wants information about you while keeping enough secrecy to avoid being questioned themselves. They become warmer when you pull away. Some people seem most loving when they feel you slipping away. After days of distance, neglect, mixed signals, or emotional coldness, they suddenly become attentive. They send affectionate messages, make promises, remember details, apologize, and behave like the person you hoped they would be all along. This warmth can feel powerful because it arrives when you are emotionally exhausted. Just as you begin accepting that the relationship may not change, they give you enough tenderness to revive your hope. The timing makes the affection feel meaningful, but it may be less about love and more about restoring access. The pattern often repeats. Once you feel secure again, their effort fades. They return to inconsistency because the immediate risk of losing you has passed. When you pull away again, the warmth returns. This creates an emotional cycle in which distance produces affection and closeness produces neglect. Over time, you may become attached not only to the person, but to the relief you feel when they finally treat you well. The contrast between coldness and warmth makes ordinary kindness feel extraordinary. You begin waiting for the loving version to return, believing that version represents who they truly are. Healthy affection does not appear mainly during emergencies. A caring partner may increase effort when the relationship is struggling, but their warmth remains visible after reassurance returns. They do not need the threat of losing you before they value your presence. Pay attention to what happens once you stop leaving. Does their effort continue or disappear the moment they feel secure again? Someone who genuinely loves you does not reserve tenderness for moments when control is threatened. Someone afraid of losing access may become warm only long enough to pull you back into the same painful cycle. They hide hurtful comments inside jokes. Some jokes are meant to create laughter. Others are designed to deliver cruelty without accountability. A person may mock your appearance, intelligence, family, ambitions, insecurities, or past mistakes, then smile and claim they were only joking when they see that you are hurt. This gives them two advantages. They get to say something painful, and they make your reaction look like the problem. Instead of discussing the insult, the conversation shifts toward whether you are too sensitive, dramatic, insecure, or incapable of taking a joke. At first, you may laugh along to avoid tension. You tell yourself they did not mean it seriously, but repeated jokes often reveal patterns. They target the same vulnerabilities, appear in front of people whose opinions matter to you, or surface whenever the person feels jealous, angry, or threatened. The darker part is how these comments slowly reshape your self-image. After hearing the same insult disguised as humor, you may begin wondering whether it contains truth. You become quieter, more self-conscious, and increasingly careful about giving them new material to use against you. Healthy humor creates connection without requiring one person to become the target. A caring partner may accidentally make a hurtful joke, but they respond with concern when you explain its impact. They apologize, stop, and do not punish you for being honest. Pay attention to what happens when you no longer laugh. Do they respect your discomfort? Or do they intensify the ridicule and recruit others to agree that you are overreacting? Someone who values you will not repeatedly turn your pain into entertainment. Someone seeking power may use humor as emotional camouflage, hiding disrespect behind laughter so they can wound you while pretending nothing serious happened. They disguise criticism as concern. Concern should make you feel supported, but disguised criticism leaves you feeling smaller while making the other person appear caring. They may begin with phrases like, "I'm only saying this because I love you," or "I'm worried about how others see you." What follows is often an attack on your appearance, intelligence, personality, friendships, ambitions, or decisions. Because the criticism is wrapped in concern, challenging it becomes difficult. If you defend yourself, they may accuse you of rejecting honesty or refusing help. The conversation shifts away from the hurtful comment and toward your supposed inability to accept advice. You are left questioning whether they insulted you or whether you are simply too sensitive. Over time, these comments can weaken your confidence. They may say they are worried that you are not attractive enough, successful enough, mature enough, or socially capable enough. Each statement introduces doubt while allowing them to claim good intentions. The darker pattern appears when their concern consistently pushes you toward choices that benefit them. They worry about friends who encourage your independence. They question opportunities that would reduce your dependence on them. They criticize clothes, habits, or goals that make you feel confident. Their concern becomes a socially acceptable way to reshape you. Healthy concern is specific, respectful, and focused on your well-being. It allows discussion and does not attack your identity. A caring partner can express worry without humiliating you or demanding control over your choices. Pay attention to how their concern makes you feel. Do you feel safer and understood, or ashamed and increasingly dependent on their approval? Genuine concern protects your dignity. Disguised criticism slowly damages it while insisting the damage was done for your own good. They make you defend ordinary choices. Ordinary choices should not feel like courtroom evidence. But with the wrong person, simple decisions begin requiring explanations. They may question why you wore something, spoke to someone, spent time alone, changed a plan, bought something small, or chose not to answer immediately. What should have remained personal suddenly becomes something you must justify. At first, the questions may sound reasonable. They say they are only curious or trying to understand. But the conversation rarely ends after one answer. Each explanation creates another question until you feel as though you are being cross-examined rather than heard. This pattern slowly changes how you behave. You begin preparing explanations before making harmless decisions. You overthink what to say, hide small details to avoid conflict, or ask permission for things that never required approval. Your independence shrinks because peace seems possible only when every choice can be defended. The darker part is that the standard often applies only to you. They may make decisions freely, change plans without notice, or protect their privacy while expecting complete access to yours. When you ask for the same openness, they call you controlling. Healthy partners can ask questions, but they do not treat your autonomy as suspicious. They trust that you can make ordinary decisions without constantly proving your loyalty, intelligence, or intentions. Pay attention to how often neutral choices become emotional trials. Do their questions create understanding, or do they make you feel guilty until you surrender your independence? Someone who respects you may disagree with a decision, but they still recognize your right to make it. Someone seeking control will keep demanding explanations until your freedom feels like something you must earn. They treat constant access as proof of love. Love should create connection, not permanent surveillance. Yet some people believe that caring for them means being available whenever they want you. They expect instant replies, constant updates, unlimited emotional support, and access to every part of your day. When you need space, they interpret it as rejection. At first, this demand may feel romantic. Their desire to speak constantly can look like intense affection. They may say they simply miss you, worry about you, or feel safest when you are always connected. But slowly, communication stops feeling voluntary and begins feeling like an obligation. If you do not answer quickly, they question where you were. If you spend time alone, they become distant or suspicious. If work, family, sleep, or personal responsibilities take your attention, they accuse you of changing or caring less. Your availability becomes the measurement they use to judge your loyalty. Over time, you may begin abandoning your own needs to prevent conflict. You check your phone constantly, explain every delay, and feel guilty whenever you are unavailable. Even peaceful moments become tense because you are waiting for the next message you must answer immediately. The darker pattern appears when they demand full access while ignoring your boundaries. They expect you to listen whenever they are upset, but become unavailable when you need support. They call constant contact intimacy, even though it leaves you exhausted and controlled. Healthy relationships allow closeness and separation. A loving partner understands that you can care deeply while working, resting, spending time with others, or simply being alone. They do not require continuous access to feel secure. Pay attention to whether communication feels like connection or monitoring. Someone who values you will appreciate your presence without claiming ownership of your time. Someone seeking control may treat every unanswered message as proof that your love is no longer enough. They resent your happiness without them. A healthy partner wants your life to contain joy, even when they are not the source of it. But some people become uncomfortable when you laugh with friends, enjoy time alone, succeed at work, discover a new interest, or return from an experience feeling energized without them. At first, their reaction may look like disappointment because they missed you. They may become quiet, make sarcastic comments, or suddenly criticize the activity you enjoyed. Instead of sharing your happiness, they create tension until the moment no longer feels worth celebrating. This reaction often comes from a need to remain emotionally central. Your independent happiness proves that your sense of fulfillment does not depend entirely on them. To someone who wants control, that freedom can feel threatening. They may fear that the more joy you find elsewhere, the less power their approval, attention, or withdrawal will hold over you. Over time, you may begin shrinking your excitement. You stop sharing good news because they always find something wrong with it. You avoid certain friends, hobbies, or opportunities because their reaction ruins the experience afterward. Eventually, you may feel guilty for enjoying anything they did not provide. The darker pattern appears when they seem calmer during your struggles than during your successes. They know how to comfort you when you feel weak, but become cold when you feel confident, admired, or independent. Your pain keeps you close. Your happiness makes you harder to control. Healthy love does not compete with your joy. A caring partner may sometimes feel left out, but they communicate honestly without punishing you. Someone who truly values you will not require your world to become smaller so they can remain the brightest part of it. They compete with your friends, work, and hobbies. A healthy partner understands that your life contains many sources of meaning, but some people treat everything that receives your attention as a rival. Your friends, work, studies, hobbies, family, and personal goals become competitors they believe they must defeat. At first, this may look like affection. They say they miss you, want more time together, or feel neglected, but no amount of reassurance seems enough. When you spend time with friends, they create tension. When work requires focus, they accuse you of choosing your career over the relationship. When a hobby brings you joy, they mock it, interrupt it, or make you feel guilty for enjoying it. The issue is not simply wanting closeness. It is their inability to tolerate anything that makes you less emotionally dependent on them. Friends offer support. Work builds confidence. Hobbies create identity. Goals give you a future. Each one reminds them that your world does not begin and end with the relationship. Over time, you may start sacrificing these parts of yourself to keep the peace. You cancel plans, stop mentioning achievements, and abandon activities that once made you feel alive. The relationship slowly becomes your entire world, not because you chose it freely, but because everything else became emotionally expensive. The darker pattern appears when they create conflict before important moments. They start arguments before meetings, celebrations, deadlines, or outings, forcing your attention back toward them. Even when they are physically absent, their emotional reaction follows you. Healthy love does not compete with your growth. A caring partner may ask for more connection, but they will not demand that you lose yourself to provide it. Someone who truly values you wants a place in your life. Someone seeking control wants to become your whole life. They debate your needs instead of respecting them. A need does not become invalid simply because someone disagrees with it, yet some people respond to your emotional needs as though they are arguments to defeat. When you ask for reassurance, space, honesty, consistency, or basic respect, they immediately begin explaining why your request is unreasonable. They may question whether you truly need it, compare you with others, or demand evidence that your feelings are justified. Instead of listening, they turn the conversation into a debate about whether you are too sensitive, demanding, insecure, or difficult. This pattern can make you doubt yourself. You begin preparing long explanations before expressing simple needs. You search for the perfect words, hoping that if you communicate clearly enough, they will finally understand. But the problem is often not confusion, it is resistance. The darker part is that endless debate delays action. While you are defending why something matters, they avoid having to change. Your exhaustion becomes useful. Eventually, you may drop the request simply because proving your pain feels more tiring than enduring it. Healthy relationships allow discussion, compromise, and different perspectives. But respectful partners do not force you to argue for your basic dignity. They may not always meet every request exactly as asked, yet they take your feelings seriously and work with you toward a fair solution. Pay attention to whether conversations about your needs create understanding or become trials where you must prove you deserve care. Someone who values you may ask questions to understand better. Someone seeking control asks questions until your need sounds irrational. When every request becomes a debate, the hidden message is that your comfort matters only when they approve of it. Over time, this teaches you to silence yourself before they get the chance. They apologize for your reaction, not their behavior. A real apology takes responsibility for what caused the pain. But some people avoid accountability by apologizing only for how you reacted. They say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," "I'm sorry you got upset," or "I'm sorry you misunderstood me." The words sound apologetic, but the responsibility is quietly placed back on you. Instead of acknowledging the lie, insult, betrayal, broken promise, or disrespect, they focus on your emotions. Your hurt becomes the problem. Their behavior disappears from the conversation, while your reaction is examined as though it were unreasonable, excessive, or embarrassing. This kind of apology can be deeply confusing because it offers just enough softness to make you question whether you should accept it. You may feel guilty for wanting more. You may begin wondering whether you overreacted, even when the original behavior was clearly harmful. The darker pattern appears when this happens repeatedly. Every conflict ends with you defending your feelings, while they avoid discussing what they actually did. They may even portray themselves as the injured person because your reaction made them uncomfortable. Over time, you may start suppressing your emotions to keep conversations calm. You speak more gently, ask for less, and accept incomplete apologies because demanding accountability feels exhausting. This allows the behavior to continue without consequences. Healthy apologies are clear. They name the action, recognize its impact, express regret, and show a willingness to change. They do not require you to erase your feelings so the other person can feel innocent. Pay attention to what the apology is truly addressing. Are they sorry for hurting you, or only sorry that you noticed, reacted, and demanded an explanation? Someone who values you will face what they did. Someone avoiding responsibility will apologize around the behavior while leaving it completely untouched. They value intention more than impact. Good intentions matter, but they do not erase harm. Some people defend every painful action by focusing only on what they meant to do. They say they were trying to help, protect, motivate, or be honest, as though their intention should automatically cancel the effect their behavior had on you. This can make conflict deeply frustrating. You explain that a comment embarrassed you, a decision excluded you, or a repeated habit damaged your trust. Instead of listening, they insist that you misunderstood them. The discussion becomes about proving they are not a bad person rather than understanding why you were hurt. The hidden danger is that intention can become a permanent shield. If they believe meaning well is enough, they never have to change. They can keep crossing the same boundary, repeating the same insult, or making the same careless decision while demanding forgiveness because they didn't mean it that way. Over time, you may begin minimizing your own pain. You tell yourself they meant well, so perhaps you should not feel hurt. You become more focused on protecting their self-image than on addressing what the behavior is doing to you. Healthy people can hold two truths at once. They can say, "I did not intend to hurt you, but I understand that I did." They care about both motive and impact because relationships are shaped by what actions actually create, not only by what someone hoped they would create. Pay attention to whether their good intentions lead to changed behavior. Do they become more careful after learning the impact, or do they keep repeating the same harm while defending their character? Someone who values you will not use intention to silence your experience. They will understand that love is not only about meaning well, it is also about caring enough to notice when your actions repeatedly leave someone wounded. They count their favors, but ignore yours. Generosity becomes dangerous when it is carefully recorded. Some people remember every favor they have done for you, every expense they covered, every sacrifice they made, and every moment they showed up. Yet when you mention what you have contributed, they minimize it, forget it, or treat it as something you were already expected to do. At first, this imbalance may be difficult to notice. Their favors are often announced, repeated, or mentioned during conflicts. Yours become invisible because they benefit from keeping the relationship's emotional scoreboard in their favor. This creates a constant sense of debt. You may begin feeling that you owe them more patience, access, loyalty, forgiveness, or obedience because they have done so much for you. Even ordinary support becomes evidence that you should tolerate behavior that hurts you. The darker pattern appears when their favors are used as protection from accountability. If you confront a lie, insult, or betrayal, they respond by listing everything they have ever given you. The conversation shifts from what they did wrong to whether you are grateful enough. Over time, you may work harder to prove your appreciation while receiving less recognition in return. You give more, explain more, and forgive more, but the balance never changes because their contributions are magnified while yours are erased. Healthy relationships do not require exact equality in every moment, but both people should feel seen. Genuine care is not stored as emotional currency to be collected later. Pay attention to how support is remembered. Does the person appreciate what you do, or only keep records of what you owe them? Someone who values you sees generosity as mutual care. Someone seeking control turns every favor into leverage and every forgotten contribution into proof that you are never giving enough. They give affection, mainly after getting their way. Affection should not feel like a reward for obedience, but some people become warm, loving, and attentive mainly after you agree with them, cancel your plans, forgive their behavior, or give them what they wanted. Their kindness arrives only after your resistance disappears. At first, this pattern can feel confusing rather than controlling. You may notice that arguments end the moment you surrender. Their voice softens, affection returns, and the relationship suddenly feels peaceful again. This relief can train you to believe that harmony depends on your compliance. Over time, the pattern becomes stronger. When you disagree, they withdraw attention, touch, conversation, or emotional warmth. When you give in, they restore everything. Without saying it directly, they teach you that love is available only when you behave correctly. The darker part is how quickly this changes your decisions. You may stop asking what you truly want and begin asking what will keep them affectionate. You apologize when you are not wrong, abandon boundaries, and silence your opinions because emotional distance feels unbearable. This is a form of conditioning. The affection becomes a prize, while coldness becomes punishment. You begin chasing the warm version of them and blaming yourself whenever it disappears. Healthy partners can feel disappointed, frustrated, or upset, but they do not make basic affection dependent on control. They can disagree without making you feel emotionally abandoned. Their warmth is not used as payment for surrender. Pay attention to when affection appears. Does it remain present through honest disagreement or return only after you submit? Someone who loves you will not require obedience before offering care. Someone seeking control may use affection like a switch, turning it on when you comply and off when you remember that you still have a choice. They withdraw. When you express a need, Expressing a need should create conversation, not punishment. Yet some people become distant the moment you ask for reassurance, honesty, time, affection, consistency, or support. Their tone changes, replies become shorter, and warmth disappears just when you are trying to be vulnerable. At first, you may assume they need space to think, but when withdrawal follows nearly every request, it can become a way to train you into silence. You begin learning that speaking honestly leads to coldness, tension, or abandonment. This pattern is powerful because it turns emotional connection into leverage. The person does not have to reject your need directly. They simply remove closeness until you feel guilty for asking. Eventually, you may apologize, lower your expectations, or pretend the need no longer matters just to restore peace. The darker part is how this changes your inner voice. You start calling yourself needy, demanding, or difficult. You rehearse simple requests for hours, soften every sentence, and still fear the emotional distance that may follow. Healthy partners may not always know how to meet every need, but they remain present. They ask questions, explain their limits, and work toward understanding. They do not make vulnerability feel dangerous. Pay attention to what happens after you speak honestly. Does the person stay connected while discussing the issue, or do they disappear emotionally until you surrender the request? Someone who values you may need time, but they will communicate that without making you feel abandoned. Someone seeking control withdraws not to process, but to make your need feel so costly that next time you keep it to yourself. They demand quick replies, but answer slowly. Communication becomes controlling when one person expects immediate access while giving themselves unlimited freedom. They may become irritated if you take too long to respond, question why you were unavailable, or treat a delayed message as proof that you are losing interest. Yet when they leave you waiting, they expect patience and understanding. At first, the imbalance may seem minor. They say they were busy, distracted, tired, or simply forgot. These explanations may be reasonable once in a while. The warning sign appears when your delays are treated like offenses, while theirs are treated like normal behavior. This creates a double standard that slowly changes how you live. You begin checking your phone constantly, replying before finishing conversations, interrupting work, or feeling anxious whenever you cannot answer. Meanwhile, they remain free to respond whenever it suits them. The darker pattern appears when slow replies are used to control your emotions. They may delay responses after conflict, disappear when you ask an important question, or return only after they know you have become worried. Their silence creates uncertainty, while your quick replies reassure them that they still have access to you. Over time, you may begin proving your loyalty through availability. You answer instantly to prevent tension, while accepting excuses you would never be allowed to use. The relationship starts teaching you that their time is valuable and yours must remain open. Healthy communication does not require identical response times, but it does require fairness. A respectful partner understands that both people have responsibilities, private moments, and lives beyond the phone. Pay attention to whether the expectation is mutual. Someone who values you will not punish you for needing time while demanding endless patience for themselves. Someone seeking control wants immediate reassurance from you without offering the same security in return. They call boundaries controlling or dramatic. Boundaries are not punishments. They are clear limits that protect your time, privacy, emotional safety, and self-respect. But some people react to boundaries as though you are attacking them. The moment you say no, ask for space, refuse disrespect, or explain what you will not tolerate, they accuse you of being controlling, dramatic, difficult, or selfish. This response is designed to make you question whether your boundary is reasonable. Instead of discussing the behavior that made the limit necessary, they place your character on trial. You begin defending your right to have needs while the original issue disappears. The pattern becomes especially harmful when every boundary is treated as rejection. If you need time alone, they say you are pulling away. If you protect your privacy, they accuse you of hiding something. If you refuse a demand, they claim you do not care enough. The goal is often to make surrender feel kinder than standing firm. Over time, you may start softening every limit. You explain too much, apologize before saying no, and accept behavior that leaves you uncomfortable because you fear another accusation. Your boundaries become weaker while their access to you becomes stronger. Healthy people may not like every boundary, but they can respect it. They may ask questions, express disappointment, or suggest compromise without insulting you for protecting yourself. Pay attention to whether your limits are discussed or mocked. Someone who values you will not require unlimited access to prove love. Someone seeking control will call your boundary dramatic because accepting it would mean admitting that your comfort, choices, and autonomy matter just as much as theirs. They treat privacy as proof of dishonesty. Privacy is a normal part of being an individual, even inside a close relationship. But some people treat any private space as evidence that you must be hiding something. They question why your phone is locked, why you need time alone, why every conversation is not shared, or why they cannot access every detail of your personal life. At first, this may sound like a request for reassurance. They claim that couples should have no secrets or that complete openness proves trust. But trust is not the same as surveillance. Genuine trust allows two people to remain separate individuals without treating every boundary as suspicious. The pressure often increases slowly. They may ask to read your messages, check your search history, demand passwords, or question private conversations with friends and family. If you refuse, they use your refusal as evidence against you. Suddenly, protecting your privacy becomes the very reason they claim you cannot be trusted. This creates an impossible situation. You must surrender access to prove innocence, yet every detail they discover can produce new questions. Over time, you may stop having private conversations, hide harmless choices, or avoid asking for space because you fear another accusation. The darker pattern appears when openness is demanded only from you. They may guard their own phone, avoid answering questions, or become angry when you request the same transparency. Privacy is considered dishonest when you want it, but necessary when they do. Healthy relationships distinguish privacy from secrecy. Privacy protects individuality. Secrecy hides information that directly affects the relationship. A respectful partner can discuss concerns without demanding ownership of your inner world. Pay attention to whether trust grows through honest communication or constant inspection. Someone who values you will respect reasonable privacy. Someone seeking control will call privacy dishonesty because uncertainty prevents them from monitoring every part of you. They make major decisions without you. Major decisions reveal whether someone sees you as a partner or merely someone expected to adjust. They may change jobs, make large purchases, invite people into shared spaces, move money, alter plans, or commit to responsibilities without discussing how those choices will affect you. At first, they may defend the decision as practical. They say there was no time, they already knew what you would say, or they were trying to avoid stress. But excluding you from important choices sends a deeper message. Your voice matters only after the outcome is fixed. This pattern can leave you feeling powerless. You are expected to absorb the consequences of decisions you never helped make. When you object, they may accuse you of being unsupportive, controlling, or difficult. Instead of acknowledging the exclusion, they focus on your reaction. Over time, you may stop expecting consultation. You begin waiting to be informed rather than included. Your role shifts from equal partner to emotional cleanup crew, managing the disruption after they decide what happens next. The darker pattern appears when they involve you only when responsibility is needed. They choose alone, but expect you to help pay, explain, sacrifice, forgive, or repair the damage. Power remains with them while consequences become shared. Healthy partners do not need permission for every personal choice, but decisions that seriously affect both people require honest discussion. Respect means allowing your perspective to influence the outcome, not merely announcing what has already been decided. Pay attention to whether your opinion can change anything. Someone who values you will consult you before major choices reshape your life. Someone seeking control may call the decision independent, but independence becomes disrespect when one person keeps deciding and the other is repeatedly forced to live with it. They use teasing to hide insults. Teasing can create closeness when both people feel safe and amused. But some people use humor to deliver insults they do not want to own. They mock your appearance, intelligence, voice, family, ambitions, habits, or insecurities, then hide behind laughter when they see the comment landed painfully. The teasing often sounds light enough to create doubt. You may wonder whether you are overreacting. If you object, they say you cannot take a joke, accuse you of being too sensitive, or claim everyone else found it funny. The focus shifts from what they said to how you responded. This gives them a powerful advantage. They can hurt you while avoiding accountability. They get to test how much disrespect you will tolerate and still keep the relationship. Each nervous laugh teaches them that they can go further next time. Over time, the insults may become more personal. They repeat the same joke in front of others, bring up private insecurities, or target areas where your confidence is already weak. What looks like playful teasing begins to shape how you see yourself. The darker pattern appears when they seem entertained by your discomfort. They watch your face, repeat the comment, or invite others to join in. Your pain becomes part of the performance. Healthy teasing is mutual, respectful, and easy to stop. A caring person notices when a joke hurts and adjusts without punishing you for speaking up. Pay attention to whether the humor brings you closer or leaves you feeling exposed. Someone who values you will not need humiliation to create laughter. Someone seeking power will use teasing as cover, delivering cruelty in a form that makes defending yourself look like the real problem. They compare you with former partners. Comparisons can quietly damage a relationship because they turn love into a competition you never agreed to enter. A person may mention how an ex was more affectionate, more attractive, calmer, more successful, or easier to understand. Sometimes the comparison is direct. Other times it appears through stories designed to make you feel inadequate. At first, you may dismiss it as honesty or casual reflection. But repeated comparisons often create pressure. You begin wondering what you must change to avoid being replaced, criticized, or judged against someone from the past. This gives the other person emotional power. Instead of discussing your relationship on its own terms, they introduce an invisible rival. You may work harder for approval, tolerate disrespect, or abandon parts of yourself just to prove you are better than someone you may never even meet. The darker pattern appears when comparisons change depending on what they want. If they want more attention, the ex was more caring. If they want obedience, the ex was less argumentative. If they want to wound your confidence, the ex suddenly becomes more attractive or desirable. Healthy people may discuss past relationships, but they do not use former partners as weapons. They talk about lessons, boundaries, and patterns without making you feel like you are being graded against someone else. Pay attention to what the comparison is trying to produce. Does it create understanding, or does it make you anxious enough to perform for their approval? Someone who values you will address your behavior directly and respectfully. Someone seeking control may keep an ex emotionally present because competition makes you easier to influence, more desperate to please, and less likely to notice that the standard keeps changing. They praise in others what they criticize in you. One of the most confusing relationship patterns happens when someone admires in other people the same qualities they punish in you. They may praise a friend for being confident, then call you arrogant. They admire someone else's independence, yet accuse you of being distant when you make your own choices. This double standard can slowly damage your confidence because the rules never stay consistent. You begin wondering why a trait is attractive in others but unacceptable when it belongs to you. The answer may have less to do with the quality itself and more to do with how your confidence affects their control. When another person is outspoken, ambitious, social, or emotionally strong, they can admire those qualities from a safe distance. But when you display them, those same traits may challenge the role they expect you to play. Your confidence makes you harder to intimidate. Your independence makes you less dependent. Your social strength reminds them that you have support beyond the relationship. The darker pattern appears when praise for others is used to make you insecure. They may repeatedly point out someone else's appearance, personality, success, or calmness while highlighting your supposed flaws. The comparison creates pressure without requiring them to make a direct demand. Over time, you may start editing yourself. You become quieter, less expressive, and more uncertain, hoping to avoid criticism. Yet the person may continue praising those traits elsewhere, proving that the issue was never the quality, it was your possession of it. Healthy partners do not punish you for strengths they celebrate in others. They can discuss behavior without applying contradictory standards. Someone who values you will not make your confidence feel like a defect. Someone seeking control may admire strength everywhere except in the person they want easier to manage. They become defensive. Over simple questions. Simple questions should create clarity, not conflict, but some people react to ordinary curiosity as though they are being accused. You may ask where they were, why a plan changed, what they meant by a comment, or whether something is wrong. Instead of answering calmly, they become irritated, evasive, or hostile. At first, you may assume they are stressed, But when defensiveness appears whenever a question could require honesty or accountability, the reaction becomes a warning sign. They may raise their voice, accuse you of mistrust, or demand to know why you are interrogating them. This response shifts attention away from the question. Suddenly, you are defending your right to ask instead of receiving an answer. The conversation becomes about your tone, timing, insecurity, or supposed suspicion, while the original issue remains unresolved. Over time, this can train you to stop asking. You begin ignoring contradictions, swallowing doubts, and pretending confusion does not matter because you fear the argument that may follow. Their defensiveness becomes a barrier protecting them from examination. The darker pattern appears when they answer simple questions with counterattacks. They bring up your past mistakes, question your loyalty, or accuse you of the very behavior you are trying to understand. This creates enough emotional chaos to make clarity impossible. Healthy people may sometimes feel uncomfortable or misunderstood, but they can still respond respectfully. They do not treat every question as a threat to their freedom. Pay attention to whether their reaction matches what you asked. Someone who values trust will understand that reasonable questions help relationships stay clear. Someone hiding something, or simply avoiding accountability, may make asking feel so dangerous that silence becomes easier than discovering the truth. They interrupt you, then blame your communication. Communication becomes impossible when one person controls who gets to finish a thought. They interrupt before you explain yourself, answer questions you have not completed, correct details that are not central, or speak over you until your original point disappears. Then, when the conversation falls apart, they accuse you of being unclear. At first, you may think the interruptions come from impatience or enthusiasm, but repeated interruption can become a subtle way to control the meaning of every conversation. They decide which parts of your experience are heard, which details are ignored, and when the discussion is allowed to end. This creates a painful trap. You try to explain more carefully, but they interrupt again. You shorten your sentences, soften your tone, and choose simpler words, yet they still claim they cannot understand you. The problem is no longer communication. The problem is that they are not allowing you enough space to communicate at all. The darker pattern appears when they use the confusion they created as evidence against you. They say you are inconsistent, emotional, difficult to follow, or incapable of expressing yourself properly. Over time, you may begin believing them. You start rehearsing conversations before speaking. You lose confidence in your own explanations. Eventually, you may stop raising important issues because you expect to be cut off, misunderstood, and blamed again. Healthy communication requires patience. A respectful partner may ask questions or disagree, but they allow you to finish before responding. They listen for meaning instead of searching for openings to take control. Pay attention to whether you are actually being heard. Someone who values you will help make the conversation clearer. Someone seeking control will interrupt the message, distort what remains, and then blame you for never explaining it properly. They demand trust while acting secretively. Trust cannot survive when one person demands complete faith while hiding their own behavior. They may insist that you stop asking questions, ignore inconsistencies, and believe their explanations without evidence. Yet they guard their phone, avoid clear answers, change stories, or become angry whenever you ask for basic transparency. At first, they may frame this as confidence. They say a healthy relationship should not require proof or that your questions reveal insecurity. This can make you feel guilty for noticing things that do not add up. Instead of addressing the secrecy, they make your doubts seem like the real problem. The imbalance becomes clearer over time. They expect you to share where you are, who you speak to, and what you are doing, but offer vague answers about themselves. They want your openness without giving you the same reassurance in return. This creates emotional confusion. You may start ignoring your instincts because you want to prove that you are trusting. You silence reasonable concerns, accept incomplete explanations, and blame yourself whenever something feels wrong. The darker pattern appears when trust is used as protection from accountability. They do not ask you to trust their consistent behavior. They ask you to trust them instead of examining it. Your loyalty becomes a shield they use to avoid being questioned. Healthy trust grows through honesty, consistency, and mutual transparency. It does not require constant access, but it also does not demand blind belief in the face of repeated secrecy. Pay attention to whether their actions make trust easier or whether they simply order you to provide it. Someone who values you will understand that trust must be supported by behavior. Someone seeking control will demand the benefits of trust while refusing the openness that allows trust to exist. They create urgency to stop you thinking. Urgency can be useful when a situation is truly time-sensitive, but some people manufacture pressure because clear thinking threatens their influence. They tell you that you must decide now, answer immediately, forgive quickly, cancel your plans, send money, reveal information, or prove your loyalty before you have time to reflect. At first, the pressure may feel emotional rather than suspicious. They may say the opportunity will disappear, the relationship will be damaged, or your hesitation proves you do not care enough. The fear of losing something important pushes you toward a decision you might not make calmly. This works because urgency narrows attention. When your mind feels rushed, you focus on avoiding immediate consequences instead of examining the larger pattern. You stop asking whether the request is fair, whether the story makes sense, or whether your boundaries are being crossed. The darker pattern appears when they become angry whenever you ask for time. They may accuse you of overthinking, being disloyal, or intentionally creating problems. Your need to pause is treated as resistance that must be defeated. Over time, you may begin responding before you understand what you are agreeing to. You apologize too quickly, accept explanations without evidence, and make sacrifices simply to end the pressure. The relief that follows can feel like peace, even though it came from surrender. Healthy people can explain why something is urgent without attacking your judgment. They allow reasonable time when the decision affects your safety, money, privacy, future, or emotional well-being. Pay attention to what happens when you say, "I need time to think." Someone who respects you may feel disappointed, but they will not punish you for slowing down. Someone seeking control creates urgency because the longer you think, the more likely you are to notice what they are asking you to ignore. They call calm disagreement disrespect. Disagreement is normal in any relationship, but some people treat even calm resistance as an attack. You may speak gently, choose your words carefully, and explain your view without insulting them, yet they still accuse you of being rude, difficult, disloyal, or disrespectful. This reaction can make you believe the problem is your tone. You begin speaking more softly, adding apologies, and carefully removing anything that might sound confrontational. But the accusation continues because the real issue is not how you disagree. It is that you disagree at all. For someone who expects control, your independent opinion can feel like defiance. They may believe respect means agreement, obedience, or silence. The moment you question a decision, challenge a contradiction, or refuse a demand, they act as though you have crossed a serious line. The darker pattern appears when they use the word respect to avoid accountability. Instead of answering your concern, they focus on your attitude. The original issue disappears while you are forced to prove that you are not hostile. Over time, you may begin suppressing reasonable thoughts to protect the peace. You nod when you disagree, accept choices that hurt you, and avoid difficult conversations because you know your honesty will be punished. Healthy respect allows two people to have different opinions without threatening the relationship. A caring partner may feel frustrated, but they can listen, respond, and remain emotionally safe. Pay attention to whether disagreement is allowed without punishment. Someone who values you will not require silence to feel respected. Someone seeking control may call your calm disagreement disrespect because admitting you have an equal voice would weaken the authority they are trying to hold over you. They treat every conflict as a battle. Conflict should help two people understand each other, but some people enter every disagreement determined to win. They do not see a problem that needs solving. They see an opponent who must be defeated, silenced, or forced to surrender. Even small issues quickly become intense. They raise their voice, interrupt, collect evidence, bring up old mistakes, and search for contradictions in your words. The goal is no longer clarity. It is proving that they are right and you are wrong. This can make you feel as though every conversation requires emotional armor. You begin preparing arguments instead of expressing feelings. You choose words carefully, not because you want to communicate well, but because you fear that one imperfect sentence will be used against you. The darker pattern appears when compromise is treated as weakness. They refuse to acknowledge your perspective because doing so feels like losing. Even when they clearly caused harm, They may keep arguing until you become too exhausted to continue. Your silence is then treated as their victory. Over time, you may begin surrendering simply to restore peace. You apologize for things you did not do, abandon valid concerns, and accept unfair outcomes because ending the conflict feels more important than being understood. Healthy conflict is not about domination. Both people can disagree, take responsibility, and search for a solution without destroying each other's dignity. A caring partner wants the relationship to survive the argument, not their ego to conquer it. Pay attention to what happens when you raise a concern. Does the person become curious or immediately prepare for combat? Someone who values you will fight the problem beside you. Someone seeking control will turn you into the problem and keep fighting until you no longer have the strength to defend yourself. They punish honesty with coldness or anger. Honesty should make a relationship clearer, but some people make truth feel dangerous. When you express disappointment, admit discomfort, question their behavior, or reveal how deeply something hurt you, they respond with silence, anger, withdrawal, or emotional distance. At first, you may believe they simply need time to process, but when coldness appears after every difficult truth, it can become a punishment. Their reaction teaches you that honesty has consequences, and that peace returns only when you soften, retract, or apologize for what you said. This pattern slowly changes how you communicate. You begin editing your feelings before speaking. You hide concerns, minimize pain, and choose silence because you already know what honesty will cost. The relationship may appear calmer, but only because your real thoughts are disappearing. The darker pattern appears when they demand openness while punishing what openness reveals. They say they want honesty, but only when it reassures them, praises them, or confirms the version of reality they prefer. The moment your truth creates discomfort, they treat it as betrayal. Over time, you may begin confusing emotional safety with keeping them pleased. You stop asking whether your feelings are valid and start asking whether expressing them will make the person withdraw again. Their anger becomes a warning system that controls what you are allowed to say. Healthy partners may feel hurt, defensive, or overwhelmed, but they do not repeatedly punish you for speaking honestly. They return to the conversation, listen, and take responsibility where necessary. Pay attention to what honesty produces. Does truth lead to deeper understanding, or does it leave you frightened of losing affection? Someone who values you may struggle with difficult conversations, but they will not require dishonesty to keep the relationship peaceful. They use old mistakes to avoid current accountability. Past mistakes should be discussed when they still need healing, but some people revive them only when their present behavior is questioned. The moment you raise a concern, they remind you of something you did months or years ago. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about what happened today. It becomes a trial of everything you have ever done wrong. This tactic creates emotional confusion because your past mistake may be real. You may feel ashamed, defensive, or obligated to stay silent. Instead of holding them accountable, you begin apologizing again for something you believed had already been addressed. The darker pattern appears when your past is used as permanent permission for their present behavior. They may suggest that you have no right to question dishonesty because you once lied, no right to ask for respect because you once lost your temper, or no right to expect change because you are not perfect either. Over time, accountability becomes impossible. Every issue you raise is redirected toward your history. You learn that speaking up will only reopen old wounds, so you begin tolerating new harm to avoid reliving previous guilt. Healthy partners can discuss past injuries without using them as weapons. If forgiveness was offered, it should not later become a tool for control. If an issue remains unresolved, it deserves its own honest conversation rather than being dragged into every disagreement. Pay attention to whether the past is being discussed to create healing or to escape the present. Someone who values the relationship can acknowledge your old mistake while still taking responsibility for what they are doing now. Someone avoiding accountability keeps your past alive because as long as you remain guilty, they never have to stand alone before their own behavior. They tell different stories to different people. Everyone may adjust small details depending on who they are speaking to, but serious changes in the same story can reveal manipulation. A person may describe one event differently to friends, family, coworkers, and you. Each version is shaped to gain sympathy, avoid blame, or protect their image. At first, the differences may seem harmless. They say they forgot a detail or explained it poorly. But when the story changes depending on what each listener is likely to believe, the pattern becomes harder to dismiss. They may present themselves as the victim to one person, the hero to another, and the innocent observer to someone else. Facts disappear, motives change, and your role may be rewritten completely. The goal is not accuracy, it is control over how each audience sees them. This can leave you feeling isolated and confused. When you finally explain your side, others may already believe a carefully edited version. You begin defending yourself against events you barely recognize. The darker pattern appears when they keep people separated. They discourage direct conversations, hide messages, or claim others said things they never said. Separation allows contradictions to survive because no one can compare stories. Over time, you may start questioning your own memory, especially if several people repeat the version they were given. But repeated agreement does not always prove truth. Sometimes it only proves that the same false story was told convincingly. Healthy people may remember events imperfectly, but their core account remains consistent. Someone who values honesty does not redesign reality for each audience. Someone seeking control tells every person the version most likely to secure loyalty, sympathy, or silence. They accuse you of motives you never had. Being misunderstood occasionally is normal, but some people repeatedly assign hidden motives to innocent behavior. You may ask a simple question, express a concern, spend time alone, or make an independent choice, and they immediately claim you are trying to embarrass, control, punish, deceive, or abandon them. This creates a frustrating trap because you are forced to defend an intention that never existed. Instead of discussing what you actually said or did, the conversation becomes centered on the meaning they invented. The more you explain yourself, the more they may insist that your denial proves you are hiding something. Over time, this can weaken your confidence in your own intentions. You begin examining every word before speaking, wondering how it might be twisted. You add unnecessary explanations, apologize for harmless choices, and avoid honest conversations because you fear being accused again. The darker pattern appears when these false motives conveniently protect them from accountability. If you question their behavior, they say you are trying to start trouble. If you establish a boundary, they claim you want to hurt them. If you ask for space, they accuse you of preparing to leave. Your legitimate concern disappears beneath the accusation. Sometimes this behavior comes from insecurity or past experiences, but repeated accusations still damage trust. Healthy partners ask what you meant before deciding what you intended. They remain open to correction and do not insist that they understand your mind better than you do. Pay attention to whether explanations bring clarity or lead to more accusations. Someone who values you will separate their fears from the facts. Someone seeking control may keep assigning harmful motives because once you are busy proving your innocence, you have less power to question what they are doing. They test how much cruelty you will tolerate. Cruelty rarely begins at its worst. It often starts with a small insult, a humiliating joke, a cold response, or a dismissive comment that seems easy to forgive. The person watches closely to see what you do next. Do you confront them, laugh nervously, make excuses, or stay silent to avoid conflict? Your reaction teaches them where the limit currently stands. If the behavior brings no consequence, they may push further. The joke becomes more personal. The criticism becomes harsher. The silence lasts longer. Each new act tests whether your boundaries have weakened enough to tolerate more. At first, you may excuse it as stress, poor communication, or a bad mood. You focus on their apology, their difficult past, or the loving moments that follow. But repeated cruelty is not an accident simply because kindness appears between incidents. The darker pattern is gradual conditioning. They may alternate disrespect with affection so that relief feels like love. After hurting you, they become gentle, which makes you focus on the return of warmth rather than the cruelty that caused the pain. Over time, behavior you once considered unacceptable begins to feel normal. You may also start changing yourself. You speak less, ask for less, and avoid subjects that might provoke another cruel response. Your world becomes smaller while their freedom to hurt you grows. Healthy people can make mistakes, but they feel genuine concern when they cause pain and change their behavior. They do not repeatedly explore how much harm you will endure. Pay attention to escalation. Someone who values you becomes more careful after learning what hurts you. Someone testing control treats every forgiven act of cruelty as permission to discover how much worse the next one can become. They weaponize your vulnerabilities. During arguments. Vulnerability is supposed to create closeness. When you reveal your fears, insecurities, painful memories, or deepest doubts, you are trusting someone with parts of yourself that require protection. But some people remember those details not to understand you, but to use them when they want to win. During an argument, they may mention the insecurity you once confessed, compare you to someone who hurt you, or repeat words connected to an old wound. The attack feels especially painful because it comes from someone who knows exactly where you are weakest. This changes the argument completely. The original issue disappears, and you are suddenly defending your worth, your past, or the parts of yourself you already struggle to accept. They gain control by making the conversation emotionally unbearable. The darker pattern appears when they later dismiss the attack as anger. They say they did not mean it, you pushed them too far, or people say things they regret during conflict. But repeated use of private pain is rarely random. It shows that they remember which wounds create the strongest reaction. Over time, you may stop being emotionally honest. You hide fears, avoid sharing painful experiences, and protect yourself from the person who should feel safest. The relationship becomes lonely because openness now feels like giving them future ammunition. Healthy partners may become angry, but they still recognize certain lines should never be crossed. They do not use your deepest pain to silence you or gain power. Pay attention to what happens to the things you share privately. Someone who values you protects your vulnerabilities even during conflict. Someone seeking control keeps them stored until the moment hurting you becomes more important than resolving the problem. They reveal things you shared privately. Privacy is one of the clearest tests of trust. When you share a fear, family problem, painful memory, insecurity, or personal struggle, you are giving someone access to information that could deeply affect you if exposed. A trustworthy person understands that this access comes with responsibility. But some people reveal private details when it benefits them. They may tell friends to gain sympathy, share your struggles during arguments, repeat your secrets as gossip, or use your personal history to shape how others see you. Later, they claim they were only asking for advice, or that the information was not a big deal. The betrayal can feel especially painful because the harm extends beyond the original disclosure. You may begin wondering who else knows, what version they heard, and whether people are judging you without understanding the full story. The darker pattern appears when they reveal information selectively. They share details that make them look patient, loyal, or mistreated while leaving out everything that would explain your side. Your vulnerability becomes material for protecting their image. Over time, you may stop sharing anything real. You keep conversations shallow, hide emotional struggles, and feel alone inside the relationship because openness no longer feels safe. The person may then accuse you of becoming distant without acknowledging why. Healthy partners may seek support, but they protect your identity and discuss sensitive matters carefully. They do not turn your private life into public evidence. Pay attention to what happens after you trust someone with something delicate. Do they guard it, or does it later return through gossip, humiliation, or outside opinions? Someone who values you treats your privacy as something sacred. Someone seeking power treats your secrets as information they can spend whenever it becomes useful. They guilt you for seeing supportive people. Supportive people help you think clearly, remember your worth, and notice patterns you may miss when emotions are involved. That is why controlling partners often become uncomfortable when you spend time with friends, relatives, mentors, or anyone who strengthens your confidence. They may not forbid the contact directly. Instead, they create guilt. They say you care more about others, accuse you of discussing private matters, or become cold whenever you make plans without them. A simple visit begins to feel like betrayal. At first, their reaction may look like loneliness or insecurity. You may reassure them, shorten your plans, or cancel occasionally to keep the peace. But the more you give in, the more they learn that guilt can separate you from the people who support you. The darker pattern appears when they criticize anyone who questions the relationship. Supportive friends are called jealous. Concerned relatives are described as controlling. Anyone who encourages your independence becomes a threat because they make it harder for the person to control how you interpret what is happening. Over time, you may stop reaching out, you hide plans, avoid sharing problems, and distance yourself from people who once helped you feel grounded. Without outside perspectives, the relationship begins to define your entire reality. Healthy partners may sometimes feel left out, but they do not punish you for maintaining meaningful connections. They understand that love does not require isolation. Pay attention to how they respond when others support you. Do they respect those relationships or make every connection emotionally expensive? Someone who values you wants you surrounded by people who care about your well-being. Someone seeking control may resent your support system because every trusted voice outside the relationship makes their influence weaker. They start conflict before important events. Some people create tension at the exact moment your attention is needed elsewhere. Before an interview, exam, celebration, trip, meeting, performance, or family gathering, they suddenly introduce an argument, accusation, emotional crisis, or unresolved complaint. At first, the timing may seem accidental. Relationships naturally experience conflict, and important events can create stress. But when the same pattern repeatedly appears before moments that matter to you, it may reveal a need to regain control of your focus. They may accuse you of neglecting them, question your loyalty, become unusually cold, or bring up an issue that could have been discussed at another time. Instead of preparing calmly, you are forced to defend yourself, provide reassurance, or repair an emotional situation they created. This affects more than your mood. Emotional conflict consumes concentration. You may arrive late, perform poorly, struggle to enjoy the event, or spend the entire experience checking your phone. Even when they are not physically present, the argument occupies the space where your confidence should have been. The darker pattern appears when your success, independence, or happiness threatens them. Important events remind them that your identity extends beyond the relationship. By creating conflict beforehand, they pull your emotional attention back toward them and make your moment partly about managing their reaction. Over time, you may begin associating important occasions with anxiety. You hide opportunities, avoid celebrating, or lower your excitement because you expect something to go wrong. Healthy partners may raise real concerns, but they consider timing. Unless an issue is urgent, they do not sabotage your focus before something meaningful. Someone who values you helps you enter important moments feeling supported. Someone seeking control may create chaos precisely when you are about to remember how capable, connected, and independent you are. They repeatedly ruin celebrations or peaceful moments. Celebrations and peaceful moments should create closeness, but some people seem unable to let joy remain untouched. During birthdays, holidays, achievements, vacations, family gatherings, or quiet evenings, they suddenly introduce criticism, jealousy, complaints, silence, or conflict. At first, the timing may seem unfortunate. Everyone has bad moods, and not every celebration goes perfectly. But when happiness is repeatedly interrupted by the same person, the pattern deserves attention. They may wait until you feel relaxed, proud, or emotionally open before changing the atmosphere. The behavior can take many forms. They may criticize your appearance before an event, complain that they are being ignored, start an argument over something minor, or withdraw affection until everyone notices. A moment meant to celebrate you becomes focused on calming, reassuring, or managing them. The darker pattern appears when your joy makes them uncomfortable. Your happiness may remind them that you can feel fulfilled without their approval. Your achievements may expose their insecurity. Peace may reduce their emotional control because you are not anxious, apologizing, or chasing reassurance. Over time, you may begin lowering your expectations. You stop planning special moments, hide good news, or remain emotionally guarded during celebrations because you are waiting for the mood to change. Joy becomes something you experience carefully instead of freely. Healthy partners may occasionally struggle during important moments, but they do not repeatedly make your happiness pay for their discomfort. They communicate needs without destroying the occasion. Pay attention to what happens when life feels good. Someone who values you can share the spotlight, protect the peace, and celebrate your joy. Someone seeking control may create pain whenever happiness begins to remind you that life can still feel complete without their emotional approval. They question your memory when facts expose them. Memory is never perfect, but some people challenge yours only when the facts make them uncomfortable. You may recall a promise, quote a message, describe an event, or mention a contradiction, and they immediately insist that you remembered it wrong. At first, this may sound reasonable. Two people can remember the same moment differently. but the warning sign appears when their version always protects them from responsibility. Your memory becomes unreliable only when it exposes a lie, broken agreement, insult, or change in their story. They may say you are confused, too emotional, exaggerating, or mixing events together. Even when you have messages, dates, or witnesses, they focus on one small detail and use it to discredit everything else. This can slowly weaken your confidence. You begin replaying conversations, checking old messages, and writing things down because you no longer trust your own mind. The more uncertain you become, the easier it is for them to decide what really happened. The darker pattern appears when they sound calm and certain while you become frustrated trying to prove yourself. Your emotional reaction is then used as evidence that you are irrational, while their confidence makes their version appear more believable. Over time, you may stop confronting contradictions because every conversation leaves you confused and exhausted. Facts no longer feel powerful when the other person can simply challenge your ability to remember them. Healthy partners can disagree about memory without attacking your mental stability. They remain open to evidence, acknowledge uncertainty, and care more about truth than being right. Pay attention to whether memory disputes happen naturally or only when accountability approaches. Someone who values honesty will examine the facts with you. Someone avoiding exposure may question your memory because making you doubt yourself is easier than admitting what they did. They deny things they clearly said. Denial becomes deeply destabilizing when someone rejects words you clearly remember hearing. They may insist they never made a promise, never insulted you, never threatened to leave, or never admitted something important. Even when the statement was recent, direct, and unmistakable, they act as though you invented it. At first, you may assume they forgot. Memory can fail and misunderstandings happen. But when denial appears mainly after their words create consequences, it becomes more than forgetfulness. It becomes a way to escape responsibility. This pattern forces you into endless proof. You search messages, replay conversations, remember dates, and repeat exact phrases, yet even evidence may not settle the issue. They may claim the message was taken out of context, the tone was misunderstood, or the words meant something completely different. The darker part is how denial attacks your certainty. You may begin questioning whether you heard correctly, reacted too strongly, or imagined the meaning. The conversation shifts from what they said to whether your memory can be trusted. Over time, you may start recording details mentally because you expect reality to be challenged later. Communication stops feeling safe. Every important conversation carries the fear that the words may be erased once they become inconvenient. Healthy people may clarify what they intended, but they do not repeatedly deny obvious statements. They can say, "I said it, but I regret it," or "I expressed myself badly." Accountability begins with admitting what happened. Pay attention to whether their memory disappears only when their words expose them. Someone who values truth may feel embarrassed, but they will face what they said. Someone avoiding responsibility may erase the sentence entirely and leave you defending reality itself. They rewrite the past until you doubt yourself. The past should provide clarity, but some people repeatedly reshape it to protect themselves. They change what was said, why something happened, who started the conflict, or what you supposedly agreed to. Each new version places them in a better position and makes your memory look unreliable. At first, you may think the disagreement is ordinary. People often remember events differently, but the pattern becomes dangerous when every retelling reduces their responsibility and increases yours. Their hurtful behavior becomes a misunderstanding. Your reaction becomes the real offense. A promise they broke becomes something they never clearly made. The constant rewriting can make you feel mentally unsteady. You begin replaying conversations, checking messages, and questioning details you once knew with confidence. The more you doubt yourself, the easier it becomes for them to define what happened. The darker pattern appears when they tell the revised version with complete certainty. Their calm confidence can make your hesitation look like proof that they are right. If you become emotional while defending your memory, they may use that reaction to portray you as confused or unstable. Over time, you may stop trusting your own judgment. You rely on them to explain past events, even when their explanation leaves you feeling guilty, ashamed, or responsible for harm they caused. Reality becomes something they control through repetition. Healthy partners can disagree about details without erasing your experience. They remain open to evidence, admit uncertainty, and acknowledge their part. Pay attention to whether the past is being remembered or redesigned. Someone who values truth will search for understanding with you. Someone seeking control will keep rewriting history until their version becomes easier for you to believe than your own memory. They provoke you, then blame your reaction. Some people create emotional pressure deliberately, then use your response as evidence that you are the problem. They may insult you, ignore you, contradict obvious facts, invade your boundaries, or repeat the exact behavior you already asked them to stop. When you finally react, they suddenly become calm and focus entirely on your anger. This creates a distorted picture of the conflict. The provocation disappears while your raised voice, frustration, tears, or harsh words become the only part discussed. They may say you are unstable, dramatic, aggressive, or impossible to communicate with. At first, you may feel ashamed of losing control. You apologize for your reaction and forget to address what pushed you there. The person learns that if they provoke you long enough, your emotional response can distract from their behavior. The darker pattern appears when they watch your limits carefully. They know which comments trigger you, which silences create anxiety, and which accusations make you desperate to defend yourself. They keep applying pressure until you respond in a way they can later use against you. Over time, you may become afraid of your own emotions. You speak less, suppress anger, and tolerate increasing disrespect because you do not want to be portrayed as the unreasonable one again. Meanwhile, the provoking behavior continues untouched. Healthy people may contribute to conflict unintentionally, but they can examine the full sequence honestly. They do not isolate your reaction from everything that caused it. Pay attention to who controls the story afterward. Someone who values truth will acknowledge both the provocation and the response. Someone seeking control will push you toward an emotional edge. Step back calmly and point to your reaction as proof that they were never the real problem. They stay calm during chaos they created. Calmness is not always proof of innocence. Some people create emotional chaos, then remain strangely composed while you struggle to respond. They may provoke jealousy, contradict facts, withdraw affection, make cruel remarks, or introduce a serious accusation, then watch quietly as the situation explodes around them. Their calm appearance can make them seem reasonable. You may be crying, frustrated, confused, or trying desperately to explain yourself while they sit back with a steady voice. To anyone watching, they may look controlled and mature, while you appear unstable. This imbalance gives them power over the story. The chaos they created becomes invisible because attention shifts toward your emotional reaction. They may say, "Look how you are behaving," without acknowledging what happened moments earlier. The darker pattern appears when their calmness feels observant rather than caring. They study your reaction, wait for you to lose control, and use your distress as evidence against you. Their composure is not helping resolve the conflict. It is helping them avoid responsibility. Over time, you may become ashamed of your emotions. You start believing that because they remain calm, they must be right. You suppress anger, question your instincts, and focus on controlling your reaction instead of examining what caused it. Healthy calmness creates safety. A caring partner uses composure to slow the conflict, acknowledge harm, and help both people communicate clearly. They do not remain detached while benefiting from the confusion they caused. Pay attention to what their calmness produces. Does it bring clarity, responsibility, and repair? Or does it leave you more distressed and easier to blame? Someone who values you uses calmness to reduce chaos. Someone seeking control may create the chaos first, then use calmness as a costume of innocence. They call you unstable after pushing your limits. Some people repeatedly push your emotional limits, then use your eventual reaction to define your character. They interrupt, accuse, ignore, mock, provoke, or pressure you long after you have asked them to stop. When you finally become overwhelmed, they point to that moment and call you unstable. This is powerful because it removes the full story. Their behavior disappears, while your tears, anger, panic, or frustration become the only evidence discussed. They present your reaction as something that appeared from nowhere. At first, you may feel ashamed. You replay the moment and wish you had stayed calmer. You apologize for how you reacted, while the repeated pressure that caused it receives little attention. The person learns that if they push you far enough, your distress can protect them from accountability. The darker pattern appears when they know your limits and continue anyway. They may repeat the exact words, silences, comparisons, or accusations that affect you most. Then, Once you break down, they step back and act concerned, detached, or morally superior. Over time, you may begin fearing your own emotions. You suppress anger, accept disrespect, and stay silent because you do not want to be labeled difficult again. Your self-control becomes their protection, while your pain remains unresolved. Healthy partners do not deliberately push someone toward emotional overload. If conflict becomes intense, they slow down, respect boundaries, and examine their own role. Pay attention to the entire sequence, not only the final reaction. Someone who values truth will acknowledge both the pressure and the response. Someone seeking control will keep provoking you until you react, then use that reaction to convince you and everyone else that you were the problem all along. They alternate affection and distance. Affection feels safest when it is steady, but some people create attachment by making warmth unpredictable. One day they are loving, attentive, reassuring, and emotionally present. The next, they become distant, cold, distracted, or difficult to reach without giving a clear reason. This sudden change creates confusion. You begin searching for what you did wrong. You replay conversations, study their tone, and work harder to bring the loving version of them back. Because affection is no longer reliable, every warm moment feels more valuable than it should. This pattern can become emotionally addictive. The distance creates anxiety, while the return of affection brings intense relief. You may mistake that relief for deep love, even though it was the withdrawal that made the warmth feel so powerful. The darker pattern appears when affection returns after you apologize, surrender a boundary, provide reassurance, or give them what they wanted. They may not openly demand obedience. Instead, they teach you that closeness is restored when you become easier to manage. Over time, your attention becomes focused on their moods. You stop asking whether your needs are being met and start asking how to keep them warm. You become more patient with disrespect because you are waiting for the affectionate version to return. Healthy relationships may contain natural changes in energy, stress, and availability, but they do not keep you constantly guessing whether love is still present. A caring partner communicates when they need space and does not use distance as punishment. Pay attention to the rhythm. Does affection remain stable enough to feel safe or appear mainly after periods of emotional deprivation? Someone who values you may need space, but they will not make warmth unpredictable enough to keep you chasing it. They reassure you only enough to keep you. Reassurance should create lasting safety, but some people offer it only when they sense you are about to leave. After long periods of uncertainty, distance, mixed signals, or broken promises, they suddenly say exactly what you have been waiting to hear. They may tell you that they love you, need you, see a future with you, or finally understand your pain. The words feel powerful because they arrive when you are emotionally exhausted. Just as you begin accepting that the relationship may never change, they give you enough hope to stay. The pattern becomes clear when reassurance never leads to consistent action. Once you feel secure again, the effort fades, promises become vague, communication weakens, and the same uncertainty returns. You are not given enough stability to feel safe, only enough comfort to stop you from leaving. The darker part is how this trains you to survive on emotional fragments. A brief apology, one affectionate evening, or one future promise begins to feel like proof that everything can still improve. You lower your expectations because even small reassurance feels enormous after prolonged neglect. Over time, you may become attached to possibility rather than reality. You stay loyal to the person they briefly become when losing you feels close, while enduring the version they are most of the time. Healthy reassurance is followed by behavior. A caring partner does not wait until the relationship is collapsing before showing consistency, clarity, and commitment. Pay attention to what remains after the emotional moment passes. Someone who values you will build security steadily. Someone seeking access may reassure you only until the danger of losing you disappears, then return to the same behavior that made you question everything. They create jealousy, then call you insecure. Jealousy does not always appear naturally. Some people create it deliberately, then shame you for reacting. They may flirt openly, praise someone else repeatedly, hide conversations, mention admirers, compare you with others, or behave differently around a person they know already makes you uncomfortable. At first, each incident may seem harmless. They say they are only being friendly, joking, or expressing admiration. But when the behavior continues after you explain how it affects you, the pattern becomes harder to dismiss. The goal may be to make you compete for their attention. Once you feel uncertain, you may become more affectionate, more available, and more willing to tolerate behavior you would normally question. Your fear of losing them begins doing the work of control. The darker pattern appears when they provoke jealousy and then attack your reaction. They call you insecure, possessive, dramatic, or controlling. Instead of discussing the behavior that created doubt, they make your emotional response the only issue. This places you in an impossible position. If you speak up, you are labeled jealous. If you stay silent, the behavior continues. Over time, you may begin distrusting your own instincts and accepting disrespect just to prove you are confident. Healthy partners do not intentionally create uncertainty to measure your love. They can have friends, speak to others, and maintain independence while still behaving with clarity and consideration. If something makes you uncomfortable, they discuss it without humiliating you. Pay attention to whether reassurance follows confusion or whether confusion is repeatedly manufactured. Someone who values you will not need to make you afraid of replacement to feel desired. Someone seeking control may keep another person emotionally present because insecurity makes you easier to manage, more desperate to please, and less likely to question their behavior. They avoid commitment but demand loyalty. Commitment should be mutual, but some people want all the benefits of a relationship without accepting the responsibility of clearly choosing it. They avoid labels, delay serious conversations, refuse future plans, or say they are not ready, yet still expect your full loyalty. They may become jealous when you speak to others, question where you are, or act hurt when you consider moving on. At the same time, they protect their own freedom by keeping the relationship undefined. You are expected to behave like a committed partner, while they remain free from the accountability commitment requires. At first, you may accept this because they say they need time. Patience can feel loving, especially when the connection seems meaningful. But when months pass and clarity never comes, uncertainty may be serving them more than it is protecting the relationship. The darker pattern appears when they offer emotional promises whenever you begin pulling away. They say you are important, describe a future together, or insist that labels should not matter. Yet when you ask for a clear decision, they become distant, defensive, or accuse you of applying pressure. Over time, you may place your life on hold. You reject other opportunities, remain emotionally available, and prove loyalty to someone who still refuses to define what they are offering you. Hope replaces security. Healthy commitment may develop gradually, but both people communicate honestly about expectations. One person should not be required to sacrifice freedom while the other hides behind uncertainty. Pay attention to whether loyalty and responsibility move in both directions. Someone who values you may need time, but they will not demand exclusive access while denying you clarity. Someone seeking control wants you fully committed to a relationship they can leave undefined. They threaten breakups when confronted. A breakup should not be used as a weapon every time accountability becomes uncomfortable. Yet some people threaten to leave whenever you question their behavior, ask for change, or express that something has hurt you. The moment you raise a concern, the conversation suddenly becomes about whether the relationship should continue. They may say, "Maybe we should just end this. You clearly do not trust me," or "I cannot be with someone who keeps complaining." Instead of addressing the issue, they make you fear losing the entire relationship. This creates emotional panic. You may immediately stop discussing the original problem and begin reassuring them that you still care. You apologize, soften your words, or take back a reasonable request because saving the relationship feels more urgent than being heard. The darker pattern appears when the threat disappears as soon as you surrender. Once you stop asking questions or accept their explanation, they become calm and affectionate again. The breakup was not a genuine decision. It was pressure designed to end the conversation on their terms. Over time, you may become afraid to confront anything. You tolerate lies, disrespect, inconsistency, or broken promises because every concern seems capable of destroying the relationship. Your silence becomes the price of keeping them. Healthy partners may honestly consider separation when serious problems cannot be resolved, but they do not repeatedly threaten abandonment to avoid ordinary accountability. They stay present, discuss the issue, and allow both people to speak without turning every disagreement into an emergency. Pay attention to when breakup threats appear. Do they arise after careful reflection, or only when you refuse to stay silent. Someone who values you will not force you to choose between honesty and the relationship. Someone seeking control may threaten to leave because fear of losing them makes you easier to silence. They disappear, then return. Expecting full access. Disappearing without explanation can create deep emotional confusion, especially when the person later returns as though nothing happened. They may ignore messages, avoid calls, withdraw for days, or suddenly become unreachable without offering clarity. During their absence, you may feel anxious, rejected, or worried that the relationship has ended. You replay conversations, search for mistakes, and wonder whether you should reach out again. The silence forces you to carry all the uncertainty while they avoid responsibility for it. Then, they return with warmth, affection, or casual conversation, expecting immediate access to your time and emotions. They may act surprised if you are hurt, saying they were busy, overwhelmed, or simply needed space. But healthy space is communicated. Disappearing leaves the other person trapped in confusion. The darker pattern appears when they return only after sensing that you are moving on. They may offer attention just as you begin detaching, restoring hope without addressing the damage their absence caused. Once they feel secure again, the distance may return. Over time, you may begin accepting their reappearances as relief instead of asking whether the pattern is respectful. You lower your expectations because any contact feels better than silence. Their return becomes more important than the accountability you deserve. Healthy partners may need time alone, but they communicate limits and do not expect closeness to resume automatically. They understand that trust must be repaired after unexplained absence. Pay attention to what happens when they come back. Do they acknowledge the impact, answer questions, and change the pattern, or simply expect the relationship to restart on their terms? Someone who values you will not disappear and return expecting your heart to remain exactly where they left it. They expect forgiveness without changing. Forgiveness can repair a relationship, but only when it is connected to accountability and change. Some people want the comfort of being forgiven without doing the difficult work of becoming safer, more honest, or more respectful. They may apologize, become emotional, promise improvement, or remind you that everyone makes mistakes. But once the immediate conflict passes, the same behavior returns. The lie is repeated. The boundary is crossed again. The disrespect reappears in a slightly different form. At first, you may keep forgiving because you want to believe the apology was sincere. You remember the good moments, consider their struggles, and hope patience will eventually lead to growth. But forgiveness without change can slowly become permission. The darker pattern appears when they become angry that you are still hurt. They may accuse you of holding grudges, living in the past, or refusing to move forward. Instead of asking what they can do to rebuild trust, they pressure you to erase the consequences before they have earned that relief. Over time, you may begin accepting apologies as substitutes for action. The words become familiar, but your sense of safety continues to shrink. You are expected to heal quickly while they remain unchanged. Healthy forgiveness does not mean pretending nothing happened. A caring partner understands that trust returns through consistent behavior, not emotional speeches. They accept that repair may take time and effort. Pay attention to what follows the apology. Does the person change patterns, respect boundaries, and make different choices, or simply wait for your pain to fade? Someone who values you will want forgiveness to mark the beginning of change. Someone seeking comfort wants it to erase the need for change entirely. They apologize dramatically but repeat the behavior. A dramatic apology can feel powerful because it creates the appearance of deep remorse. They may cry, beg, make intense promises, describe how terrible they feel, or speak as though the moment has changed them completely. Their emotion can be so strong that your attention shifts from what they did to how much they seem to be suffering. At first, this may feel sincere. You may believe that someone who reacts so strongly must truly understand the damage. You comfort them, accept the apology, and feel hopeful that the relationship has reached a turning point. But the real meaning of an apology is revealed afterward. If the same lie, insult, betrayal, withdrawal, or boundary violation returns, the emotion did not create change. It only ended the immediate consequences. The darker pattern appears when the apology becomes a performance. They know which words soften you, which promises restore hope, and how much emotion makes you feel guilty for remaining upset. The apology becomes less about repairing harm and more about regaining access to you. Over time, you may become trapped in a repeating cycle. Harm is followed by drama, drama is followed by forgiveness, and forgiveness is followed by the same behavior. Each apology feels intense, but the pattern remains stable. Healthy remorse is often quieter than people expect. It appears through responsibility, changed choices, patience, and respect for the time you need to heal. Someone who truly regrets hurting you does not rely on emotion alone. Pay attention to what changes after the tears stop. Someone who values you will make the apology visible through different behavior. Someone seeking another chance without real growth may keep apologizing beautifully because words are easier than becoming safe. They use gifts to erase unresolved harm. Gifts can express care, but they can also be used to avoid accountability. After hurting you, someone may suddenly become generous. They buy something expensive, plan a surprise, send flowers, or overwhelm you with affection before the real issue has been discussed. At first, the gesture may feel comforting. You may think the gift proves they regret what happened. But when generosity replaces conversation, the harm remains unresolved. The object becomes a distraction from the apology, responsibility, and change you actually needed. This creates emotional pressure because rejecting the gift can make you feel ungrateful. Accepting it may also make you feel as though you have agreed to move on. The person can then act confused or offended if you raise the issue again. They may say, "After everything I did for you, you are still upset?" The darker pattern appears when gifts are repeatedly used after serious betrayal, disrespect, or broken promises. Instead of changing the behavior, they change the atmosphere. Your pain is covered with excitement, affection, or luxury until the conflict becomes harder to mention. Over time, you may begin confusing compensation with repair. You receive something pleasant, feel temporary relief, and silence your hurt to avoid ruining the moment. But the original wound remains beneath the surface. Healthy repair may include thoughtful gestures, but gifts do not replace accountability. A caring partner listens, apologizes clearly, respects your boundaries, and changes the pattern. Pay attention to what the gift is asking you to forget. Someone who values you may offer kindness while still facing the harm directly. Someone avoiding responsibility may keep buying peace because spending money or giving presents is easier than becoming trustworthy. They make you manage all their emotions. Emotional support is part of a healthy relationship, but some people slowly make you responsible for every feeling they experience. Their anger, sadness, jealousy, anxiety, boredom, and disappointment become problems you are expected to solve. At first, this may feel like closeness. They trust you, need reassurance, and say you are the only person who can calm them. You may feel important because your presence seems to bring them comfort. But over time, support turns into emotional labor you are never allowed to stop performing. If they feel insecure, you must prove your loyalty. If they feel angry, you must choose the perfect words. If they feel lonely, you must cancel your plans. If they become jealous, you must reduce your freedom until they feel safe again. Their emotions become instructions for your behavior. The darker pattern appears when they refuse responsibility for regulating themselves. They may say, "You made me feel this way," or blame you for not preventing their reaction. Instead of learning to communicate, reflect, or calm themselves, they expect you to absorb the discomfort. Over time, you may become constantly alert to their mood. You study their tone, facial expressions, and silence, trying to prevent another emotional crisis. Your own feelings become secondary because there is never enough room for both people's needs. Healthy partners support each other, but they also take responsibility for their internal world. They can ask for comfort without making you their permanent emotional caretaker. Pay attention to whether support feels mutual. Someone who values you will appreciate your care without treating it as an obligation. Someone seeking control may make their emotional stability depend on your obedience, teaching you that peace is possible only when you keep them comfortable. They blame you for their anger. Anger is a real emotion, but each person is responsible for how they handle it. Some people avoid that responsibility by insisting that you caused not only their frustration, but also the way they chose to behave afterward. They may say, "Look what you made me do. I would not get this angry if you listened," or "You know how to push my buttons." These statements turn their reaction into your fault. They're shouting, insults, threats, silence, or intimidation are presented as unavoidable consequences of your behavior. At first, you may focus on what you could have done differently. You speak more carefully, avoid certain subjects, and try to predict what might upset them. But the rules keep changing because the real problem is not your wording. It is their refusal to regulate themselves. The darker pattern appears when their anger becomes a method of control. Once you believe you are responsible for it, you begin adjusting your choices to keep them calm. You stop disagreeing, hide concerns, and accept unfair treatment because preventing another outburst feels safer than being honest. Over time, you may become constantly alert. You study their tone, mood, and expression, trying to catch anger before it grows. Meanwhile, they learn that anger quickly brings silence, compliance, or apology from you. Healthy partners can say, "I feel angry because of what happened," while still owning their response. They can pause, communicate, and repair harm without making you responsible for their self-control. Pay attention to whether their anger explains their behavior or excuses it. Someone who values you takes responsibility even when upset. Someone seeking control may blame you for their anger because guilt makes you easier to silence and fear makes you easier to manage. They treat your exhaustion as lack of love. Exhaustion is a human limit, not proof that your feelings have changed. Yet some people interpret your need for sleep, quiet, space, or reduced activity as rejection. When you are too tired to talk, go out, offer reassurance, or solve another emotional problem, they accuse you of no longer caring. At first, you may try to prove them wrong. You stay awake longer, cancel your rest, answer messages immediately, or continue giving attention when your body is asking you to stop. Their disappointment makes self-care feel selfish. The pattern becomes harmful when your tiredness is treated like a moral failure. They may say that love should give you energy, that you would make time if they mattered, or that you were never too tired for other people. Instead of responding with care, they turn your exhaustion into evidence against you. The darker part is how this teaches you to ignore yourself. You begin hiding how drained you feel, pushing through emotional overload and measuring your love by how much discomfort you can endure. Rest becomes something you must earn after everyone else is satisfied. Over time, this can create resentment and emotional burnout. You are expected to keep giving while the relationship offers little space for recovery. Your exhaustion grows, yet the person demands even more proof because your reduced energy feels threatening to them. Healthy partners understand that love does not erase physical and emotional limits. They may miss you or feel disappointed, but they do not punish you for needing rest. Pay attention to whether your exhaustion is met with compassion or accusation. Someone who values you will want your energy protected. Someone seeking control may call your tiredness a lack of love because guilt keeps you available long after your body has asked you to stop. They guilt you for resting or focusing on yourself. Rest and self-care are necessary, but some people treat them as selfish choices. When you sleep, spend time alone, work toward a personal goal, or protect your mental energy, they act as though you are taking something away from them. At first, the guilt may sound affectionate. They say they miss you, wish you would make more time, or feel unimportant when you focus elsewhere. But instead of respecting your limits, they turn your need for recovery into proof that you do not care enough. They may interrupt your quiet time, create problems when you begin relaxing, or suddenly need reassurance whenever you focus on yourself. A simple boundary becomes an emotional conflict. You are forced to choose between meeting your own needs and preventing their disappointment. The darker pattern appears when they benefit from keeping you exhausted. A rested person thinks more clearly, notices unhealthy behavior, and has the strength to defend boundaries. Someone who wants constant access may feel threatened when you regain energy, confidence, or independence. Over time, you may begin feeling guilty whenever you are not giving. You rest with your phone nearby, apologize for being unavailable, and abandon personal goals because focusing on yourself creates too much tension. Your well-being becomes something you sacrifice to prove your loyalty. Healthy partners understand that personal care strengthens a relationship. They do not need you depleted to feel loved. They encourage you to sleep, grow, learn, and maintain an identity beyond the connection. Pay attention to how they respond. When you choose yourself in reasonable ways, someone who values you will respect the time you need to recover and develop. Someone seeking control may make self-care feel like betrayal because the stronger you become, the less easily guilt can keep you emotionally available. They claim nobody else understands your relationship. Some relationships feel private and complex, but repeated claims that nobody else could understand can become a powerful form of isolation. A person may dismiss every outside concern by saying friends are jealous, family members are biased, or outsiders cannot understand the bond you share. At first, this may feel protective. They make the relationship seem rare, intense, and too meaningful for ordinary people to judge. You may begin believing that criticism from others only proves how special the connection is. The danger appears when this belief separates you from reality checks. Supportive people may notice changes in your confidence, mood, or behavior. Instead of considering their concerns, the person teaches you to reject anyone who questions the relationship. The darker pattern is that isolation does not always begin with direct control. They may not forbid contact. They simply make outside opinions feel ignorant, hostile, or dangerous. Over time, you stop sharing what happens because you expect others to misunderstand. This gives one person increasing control over the meaning of every event. Their explanation becomes the only one you hear. Hurtful behavior is called passion. Jealousy is called love. Control is called protection. Your confusion is treated as proof that you need them to explain the relationship to you. Healthy partners understand that trusted people can offer valuable perspective. They may disagree with outside opinions, but they do not fear every honest conversation. Pay attention when someone repeatedly insists that only they understand what happens between you. Someone who values you will not need to isolate the relationship from every supportive voice. Someone seeking control may call the bond misunderstood because secrecy allows unhealthy patterns to survive without challenge. They label every critic jealous or toxic. Not every critic is right, but when someone dismisses every concerned person as jealous, toxic, bitter, or controlling, they may be protecting themselves from accountability. Instead of examining what was said, they attack the character of whoever said it. At first, this can sound convincing. They explain that your friend envies the relationship, your family wants to control you, or a former partner is simply angry. Each criticism receives a personal explanation that makes the warning easier to ignore. The pattern becomes dangerous when no outside concern is ever considered fairly. Anyone who notices disrespect, inconsistency, isolation, or control is immediately placed in the enemy category. The person does not respond to the actual behavior being questioned. They make you defend the relationship from the critic instead. This can slowly separate you from supportive people. You may stop sharing problems because you already know how your partner will describe anyone who disagrees. Over time, you begin doubting people who have cared about you for years while trusting the person who benefits most from your isolation. The darker pattern appears when the label changes depending on the critic. Friends are jealous. Family members are controlling. Coworkers are interfering. Therapists are biased. No source is considered trustworthy unless it supports their version of events. Healthy people can disagree with criticism without attacking everyone who raises it. They may explain their side, acknowledge mistakes, or consider whether part of the concern is valid. Pay attention to whether they answer criticism with evidence or character attacks. Someone who values truth can tolerate being questioned. Someone seeking control may label every critic toxic because once all outside voices are discredited, their version of reality becomes the only one you are allowed to trust. They isolate you from people who notice the signs. Isolation often begins with the people who see the relationship most clearly. A friend notices that you seem anxious. A relative questions why you are always apologizing. Someone close to you points out that your confidence has changed. Instead of addressing those concerns, the person begins creating distance between you and anyone who notices the pattern. They may say your friends are interfering, your family is controlling, or certain people do not want you to be happy. At first, this can sound protective. They present themselves as defending the relationship from outsiders who supposedly misunderstand it. But the real danger is not simply losing contact. It is losing perspective. Supportive people remember who you were before the relationship began. They notice changes you may have slowly accepted as normal. Their questions can interrupt the version of reality you are being encouraged to believe. The darker pattern appears when the person creates consequences around contact. They become cold after you see someone, start arguments before visits, criticize every conversation, or demand details about what was discussed. Eventually, maintaining those relationships feels so exhausting that you begin withdrawing on your own. Over time, isolation makes control easier. Without outside support, you have fewer people to reassure you, challenge false accusations, or help you recognize escalating behavior. The person's interpretation becomes the loudest voice in your life. Healthy partners do not fear the people who genuinely care about you. They may dislike certain opinions, but they do not punish you for having support. Pay attention to who they want removed from your life. Someone who values you will not isolate you from people who protect your well-being. Someone seeking control often targets the people who notice the signs because awareness is dangerous to anyone who depends on your confusion. They act charming publicly and cruel privately. Some people build a public image so convincing that your private experience becomes difficult for others to believe. Around friends, family, co-workers, or strangers, they appear warm, patient, generous, and deeply caring. Behind closed doors, however, they become cold, insulting, controlling, or emotionally punishing. This contrast can leave you feeling trapped. When you try to explain what happens privately, people may struggle to understand because they have only seen the charming version. They may say the person seems wonderful, calm, or devoted. Their disbelief can make you question your own experience. The public charm is often carefully managed. They know when to smile, offer help, show affection, and appear protective. These actions strengthen their reputation while weakening your credibility. If you eventually react emotionally in public, they may remain calm and allow others to assume you are the difficult one. The darker pattern appears when private cruelty increases after public praise. Once everyone sees them as kind, they feel safer behaving differently when no one is watching. They may even remind you that nobody would believe your version because everyone loves them. Over time, you may begin protecting their image. You hide problems, smile in photographs, and act grateful around others because exposing the truth feels embarrassing or dangerous. The gap between public appearance and private reality leaves you increasingly alone. Healthy people are not perfect in every setting, but their core respect remains consistent. They do not reserve kindness for witnesses while giving cruelty to the person closest to them. Pay attention to who they become when there is no audience. Someone who values you treats your dignity as important even when nobody is watching. Someone seeking control may perform kindness publicly because a good reputation makes private cruelty easier to deny. They recruit supporters before you explain yourself. Some people do not wait for conflict to be understood. The moment tension begins, they contact friends, relatives, co-workers, or mutual connections and tell their version first. By the time you speak, the audience may already see them as the victim and you as the problem. This can feel deeply unfair because people rarely hear the full story. They hear selected details, emotional language, and carefully framed events designed to create sympathy. Important context is removed while your worst reaction is highlighted. The first version often becomes the strongest version. Once people form an opinion, they may interpret everything you say as defensiveness. Even calm explanations can sound like excuses because the emotional groundwork was laid before you arrived. The darker pattern appears when supporters are used as pressure. Friends begin messaging you, relatives tell you to apologize, or mutual contacts repeat accusations you never had the chance to answer. A private disagreement becomes a public trial. Over time, this can make you afraid to confront anything. You know that speaking up may trigger another campaign in which several people are recruited against you. Instead of solving problems directly, the person builds a team that makes resistance feel lonely and dangerous. Healthy partners may seek advice, but they do not distort events or turn others into weapons. They protect privacy, include context, and remain willing to hear your side. Pay attention to whether outside support is being used for guidance or control. Someone who values fairness will not rush to damage your reputation before speaking with you. Someone seeking power may tell the story first because controlling the audience is easier than answering the person who knows what actually happened. They share selective stories that make you look unstable. A person can distort the truth without inventing every detail. Sometimes they simply remove the parts that explain your reaction. They tell others that you shouted, cried, left suddenly, or became angry, but leave out the insults, pressure, betrayal, or repeated provocation that happened first. Because your reaction is shown without context, you begin to look irrational. They appear calm, patient, and confused, while you are presented as emotional, unpredictable, or difficult. The story may contain enough truth to sound believable, which makes the manipulation harder to detect. This selective storytelling protects their image. Instead of explaining what they did, they focus on how you responded. They may repeat your harshest words while hiding the hours of pressure that came before them. They describe your boundary as punishment, your withdrawal as cruelty, or your fear as instability. The darker pattern appears when they tell different pieces to different people. One person hears about your anger, another hears about your jealousy, someone else hears that you are controlling. Together, these fragments create a damaging image that no single story could support honestly. Over time, you may feel forced to defend your character instead of discussing what happened. Even people who once trusted you may begin approaching you cautiously because they have heard a carefully edited version of your private pain. Healthy people who seek advice include context and acknowledge their own role. They do not need to erase your reasons to make themselves look innocent. Pay attention to whether the story explains the whole conflict or only displays your worst moment. Someone who values truth may admit that both people reacted badly. Someone seeking control will remove everything that makes your reaction understandable, then use what remains as proof that you were unstable all along. They use others as messengers, spies, or judges. Healthy relationships depend on direct communication, but some people pull outsiders into private problems to gain information, apply pressure, or control the story. Instead of speaking to you openly, they send friends or relatives to deliver messages, question your choices, or persuade you to surrender. At first, this may seem like harmless support. A mutual friend says they are worried. Someone asks where you have been, or a relative encourages you to apologize. But when several people begin repeating the same language, asking unusually specific questions, or defending a story they only heard from one side, they may be acting as extensions of the person's influence. Some are used as messengers. They deliver accusations, warnings, apologies, or breakup threats so the person can affect you without facing your response directly. Others become spies, quietly gathering information about your plans, emotions, friendships, or conversations. The darker pattern appears when outsiders are turned into judges. Instead of resolving conflict privately, the person creates an audience and asks others to decide who is right. Because these people often receive a selective version, their opinions may place pressure on you before you can explain what happened. Over time, you may feel watched from every direction. Ordinary conversations become risky because anything you share could return to the relationship. You begin questioning who is trustworthy and may withdraw from people who once felt safe. Healthy partners may seek advice, but they do not recruit others to monitor, confront, or overpower you. They communicate directly and protect the privacy of the relationship. Pay attention when several people suddenly know details you never shared with them. Someone who values fairness speaks with you. Someone seeking control may build a network around you until private conflict feels like a public trial you were never allowed to prepare for. They make defending yourself look suspicious. Defending yourself should be a normal response when you are misunderstood, falsely accused, or treated unfairly. But some people twist your explanation into evidence that you must be guilty. The more clearly you try to speak, the more suspicious they claim you sound. They may say innocent people do not explain so much, that your details feel rehearsed, or that your emotional reaction proves you are hiding something. If you stay quiet, they call your silence suspicious. If you respond, they call your defense suspicious. Either way, the conclusion has already been chosen. This creates an impossible trap. You are no longer trying to establish the truth. You are trying to manage how every word, pause, expression, and emotion might be interpreted against you. The accusation becomes impossible to escape because every response is treated as confirmation. The darker pattern appears when they provoke confusion before demanding an explanation. They interrupt you, change the accusation, reject evidence, or ask several questions at once. When your answer becomes frustrated or inconsistent under pressure, they point to the confusion they created as proof that you cannot be trusted. Over time, you may stop defending yourself entirely. You accept blame, apologize for things you did not do, or remain silent because speaking only seems to make the situation worse. Your surrender is then treated as another sign of guilt. Healthy people ask questions to understand, not to trap. They remain open to evidence and allow explanations to change their view. Pay attention to whether the person is seeking truth or protecting an accusation. Someone who values fairness will listen to your defense. Someone seeking control will make every attempt to clear your name look like further proof that you have something to hide. They accuse you of what they are hiding. Sometimes an accusation reveals more about the accuser than the person being blamed. Someone may repeatedly accuse you of lying, cheating, hiding messages, seeking attention, or planning to leave, even when your behavior gives them little reason to believe it. This can be a form of projection. Instead of facing their own actions, thoughts, or intentions, they place them onto you. By keeping you busy defending yourself, they reduce the chance that you will examine what they are doing. At first, you may respond with reassurance. You explain where you were, show messages, answer questions, and work harder to prove your loyalty. But the accusations continue because reassurance was never the real solution. The suspicion may be protecting a secret they do not want exposed. The darker pattern appears when their accusations closely match their own hidden behavior. They accuse you of flirting while maintaining secret conversations. They question your honesty while changing their story. They fear you will leave while quietly preparing their own exit. Over time, you may become so focused on proving your innocence that you stop trusting your instincts. The relationship becomes an investigation of you, while their actions remain largely unexamined. Healthy partners may experience insecurity, but they can discuss it without treating assumptions as facts. They remain willing to look at evidence and question their own fears. Pay attention to accusations that appear intense, repeated, and strangely specific. Someone who values truth will seek clarity from both sides. Someone hiding something may accuse you first because placing suspicion on you creates cover, confusion, and enough emotional chaos to keep attention away from what they fear you might discover. They monitor your location or messages without consent. Trust does not require secret surveillance. When someone checks your location, reads your messages, opens your accounts, searches your phone, or tracks your movements without permission, they are crossing a serious boundary. They may call it concern, protection, or reassurance, but access taken without consent is control. At first, you may discover something small. They know where you were without being told, mention a private conversation, or question a message they should never have seen. When confronted, they may say, "You would not mind if you had nothing to hide." This argument is designed to make privacy look suspicious. Instead of discussing how they violated your trust, you are forced to prove your innocence. Their behavior becomes justified by the information they hope to find. The darker pattern appears when monitoring changes how you live. You begin deleting harmless messages, avoiding certain conversations, or constantly checking whether you are being watched. Even ordinary choices start feeling dangerous because you do not know what they can see or how they will interpret it. Over time, surveillance can isolate you. Friends may stop speaking honestly if they believe their messages are being read. You may avoid seeking support because private conversations no longer feel private. The person gains influence not only over your actions, but over who can safely reach you. Healthy partners can discuss shared location or device access, but it must be voluntary, mutual, and easy to withdraw. Consent given once does not create permanent ownership. Pay attention to whether access is requested or secretly taken. Someone who values you builds security through communication. Someone seeking control may monitor you because uncertainty reminds them that parts of your life still exist beyond their permission. They demand passwords as proof of loyalty. Trust should grow from honesty and consistent behavior, not forced access to every private account. Yet some people demand your phone password, email login, social media details, or banking access, and call it proof that you have nothing to hide. At first, the request may sound romantic. They claim committed partners should share everything, or that complete openness will make the relationship stronger. If you hesitate, they accuse you of secrecy, dishonesty, or caring more about privacy than the relationship. This creates a false choice. Surrender your privacy or appear guilty. Instead of respecting your boundary, they make refusal feel like evidence against you. You may eventually share passwords simply to stop the accusations, even though the decision does not feel voluntary. The darker pattern appears when access becomes inspection. They read old conversations, question harmless messages, examine who follows you, and search for details they can interpret suspiciously. Nothing you provide creates lasting trust because surveillance feeds the insecurity it claims to solve. Over time, you may begin controlling your behavior before they even check. You delete harmless conversations, avoid speaking freely with friends, and worry that ordinary words will be taken out of context. Your private world becomes a place you must constantly defend. Healthy partners may voluntarily share certain access for practical reasons, but consent must remain mutual and reversible. Love does not give someone permanent ownership of your accounts, conversations, or identity. Pay attention to what happens when you say no. Someone who values you may discuss their insecurity, but they will still respect your boundary. Someone seeking control will call passwords proof of loyalty because once they gain access, privacy becomes something you must repeatedly justify rather than a basic part of being your own person. They appear unexpectedly to check on you. An unexpected visit can feel romantic when it is thoughtful and welcome. But when someone repeatedly appears without warning to verify where you are, who you are with, or whether you told the truth, the behavior may be less about affection and more about surveillance. At first, they may present it as spontaneity. They say they missed you, happened to be nearby, or wanted to surprise you. Yet their attention quickly moves toward details. They scan the room, question who is present, notice unfamiliar objects, or compare what they see with what you previously told them. The warning sign is not simply that they arrived unexpectedly. It is the feeling that you are being inspected. Their visit seems designed to catch a contradiction rather than create connection. If you appear uncomfortable, they may accuse you of hiding something or ask why seeing them should be a problem. Over time, this can make you feel watched even when they are absent. You begin preparing explanations for ordinary situations, checking your surroundings, or avoiding harmless plans because you fear they may suddenly appear and interpret something incorrectly. The darker pattern appears when surprise visits follow moments of independence. They show up when you are with friends, working late, spending time alone, or doing something they cannot directly monitor. Their physical presence becomes a way to remind you that privacy can be interrupted at any moment. Healthy partners can enjoy surprises, but they respect schedules, personal space, and your right to say that a visit is inconvenient. They do not use affection as cover for inspection. Pay attention to what happens after they arrive. Someone who values you wants to share time with you. Someone seeking control may appear unexpectedly because catching you unprepared gives them more information, more leverage, and a stronger sense that no part of your life is beyond their reach. They verify your movements through others. Trust begins to disappear when someone checks your movements through other people instead of speaking to you directly. They may contact friends, relatives, coworkers, neighbors, or mutual connections to confirm where you were, who you were with, and whether your story matches theirs. At first, this may be disguised as casual conversation. Someone asks what time you arrived, whether you attended an event, or who else was present. Later, you realize the questions were not random. Information was being collected and reported back. This creates a disturbing sense that your life is being monitored through a network. Even when the person is not physically present, you may feel watched. Ordinary social interactions become uncomfortable because you do not know who is simply talking to you and who is gathering details. The darker pattern appears when the person compares reports, searches for small inconsistencies, and treats normal differences in memory as proof of dishonesty. Instead of building trust through direct communication, they create an investigation around you. Over time, this can isolate you. You may stop telling people your plans, avoid certain places, or withdraw from relationships because you fear private details will be passed along. The monitoring changes not only where you go, but how freely you live. Healthy partners may contact others in a genuine emergency, but they do not routinely recruit people to verify your movements. They ask you directly and allow trust to be shaped by consistent behavior. Pay attention to whether others seem unusually informed about your schedule or ask questions that feel connected. Someone who values you does not need a network of witnesses to feel secure. Someone seeking control may verify your movements through others because direct trust gives you freedom, while hidden surveillance keeps you feeling observed even when they are nowhere near you. They control money, transport, communication, or documents. Control becomes especially dangerous when someone gains power over the practical tools you need to live independently. They may manage all the money, decide when you can use transport, restrict your phone access, hold your identification, or keep important documents where you cannot reach them. At first, this may appear helpful. They say they are better with finances, want to simplify things, or are protecting valuable documents. But support becomes control when you must ask permission to buy necessities, travel somewhere, contact people, or access information that belongs to you. This kind of control can quietly trap you. Without money, leaving becomes difficult. Without transport, your movements depend on their approval. Without private communication, reaching supportive people becomes risky. Without identification, bank records, school papers, or medical documents, even basic decisions can feel impossible. The darker pattern appears when access changes according to your behavior. Money is withheld after disagreement. Transport is suddenly unavailable when you plan to see someone. Your phone is taken during conflict. Important documents disappear when you mention independence. Practical resources become rewards for obedience and punishments for resistance. Over time, you may begin believing you cannot function without them. Every ordinary task requires cooperation, which gives them influence over where you go, who you speak to, and what choices remain possible. Healthy partners may share finances, vehicles, accounts, or responsibilities, but both people retain reasonable access, knowledge, and decision-making power. Help should increase independence, not remove it. Pay attention to whether shared resources remain accessible when you disagree. Someone who values you will not use necessities to control your behavior. Someone seeking power may control money, movement, communication, or documents because limiting your options makes resistance harder and dependence feel unavoidable. They disrupt work, school, sleep, or appointments. A supportive relationship should help protect the parts of your life that keep you stable and independent, but some people repeatedly interrupt your work, studies, sleep, medical care, or important appointments, especially when those responsibilities require attention that is not focused on them. They may start arguments before an exam, call repeatedly during work, keep you awake with emotional demands, or create a crisis when you need to leave for an appointment. Each disruption may appear accidental, but the pattern becomes clearer when it repeatedly happens during moments that matter to your future or well-being. At first, you may try to balance everything. You answer messages during meetings, sacrifice sleep to finish arguments, arrive late, or miss deadlines because calming them feels urgent. They may even frame your responsibilities as evidence that you care more about work, school, or other people than the relationship. The darker pattern appears when your progress threatens their control. Education can expand your choices. Employment can provide financial freedom. Medical care can strengthen your health. Rest can improve your judgment. By disrupting these areas, they keep you exhausted, distracted, dependent, and less able to challenge unhealthy behavior. Over time, the damage can become serious. Your performance declines, appointments are missed, and sleep deprivation weakens your emotional control. The person may then criticize you for being forgetful, unsuccessful, or unstable without acknowledging how often they interfere. Healthy partners understand that responsibilities cannot always be interrupted. They respect your schedule, support your goals, and wait when a conversation is not urgent. Pay attention to whether disruption repeatedly occurs before important commitments. Someone who values you protects what helps you grow. Someone seeking control may create chaos around work, school, sleep, or appointments because independence becomes harder when your energy, progress, and stability are constantly under attack. They create dependence, then shame you for it. Dependence can grow quietly when someone begins handling more and more of your life. They manage the money, make decisions, provide transport, speak for you, solve problems, or discourage you from doing things independently. At first, this may feel like care. They seem helpful, protective, and willing to carry responsibilities for you. But support becomes dangerous when it removes your confidence and options. They may insist that certain tasks are too difficult for you, criticize your attempts, or take over before you can learn. Over time, you may begin relying on them because they have made independence feel risky, unnecessary, or impossible. The darker pattern appears when they later shame you for the dependence they created. They call you needy, helpless, lazy, ungrateful, or incapable. They complain that they must do everything, even though they repeatedly blocked your attempts to participate or regain control. This creates a painful, emotional trap. You feel guilty for needing them, but every effort to become more independent may be discouraged, mocked, or sabotaged. They keep the power while making you feel responsible for the imbalance. Over time, your self-trust can weaken. You may stop believing you can manage money, make decisions, travel alone, solve problems, or survive without their guidance. Their criticism begins sounding like truth because your opportunities to prove otherwise have slowly disappeared. Healthy support increases your strength. A caring partner may help when needed, but they also encourage your skills, choices, and independence. They do not make themselves essential and then punish you for relying on them. Pay attention to whether their help expands your freedom or reduces it. Someone who values you wants you capable and secure. Someone seeking control may create dependence because people who doubt their ability to function alone are easier to keep, shame, and command. They sabotage opportunities that increase your freedom. Some opportunities do more than improve your life. A new job, course, friendship, promotion, license, savings plan, or move can give you confidence, money, support, and choices. That is exactly why a controlling person may feel threatened by them. At first, they may pretend to be concerned. They say the opportunity is too risky, too demanding, too far away, or not worth your time. Their doubts may sound practical, but the pattern becomes clearer when every path toward independence receives the same resistance. They may start arguments before interviews, discourage you from applying, hide information, create emergencies, mock your abilities, or suddenly need more of your time. Sometimes the sabotage is subtle enough to look accidental. You miss a deadline, arrive distracted, or lose confidence before you even begin. The darker pattern appears when they support opportunities that keep you dependent but resist those that expand your options. They are comfortable when your goals remain small, flexible, or connected to them. But when success could give you financial security, social support, mobility, or the confidence to leave, their encouragement disappears. Over time, you may begin rejecting opportunities before they can interfere. You tell yourself you are not ready, capable, or deserving. Their fear becomes your inner voice, and the freedom you could have built starts feeling dangerous. Healthy partners may raise genuine concerns, but they also help you evaluate risks without destroying your confidence. They do not need you limited to feel secure. Pay attention to what happens when an opportunity increases your independence. Someone who values you wants your world to grow. Someone seeking control may sabotage your progress because every new option reduces the power they gain from making you believe you have nowhere else to go. They threaten to expose secrets if you resist. A secret shared in trust should never become a weapon, but some people threaten to reveal private information when you set a boundary, question their behavior, refuse a demand, or try to leave. They may hint that friends, family, co-workers, or the public would see who you really are if you stop cooperating. At first, the threat may be indirect. They mention that they know things about you, remind you how damaging certain information could be, or joke about what would happen if others found out. The message is clear even when the words remain vague. Your privacy depends on your obedience. This creates powerful fear because the threat reaches beyond the relationship. You are no longer only worried about conflict with one person. You are worried about humiliation, damaged trust, lost opportunities, or judgment from people whose opinions matter to you. The darker pattern appears when the secret has little connection to the current disagreement. It is introduced only because it gives them leverage. Instead of resolving the issue, they force you to choose between protecting yourself and protecting your reputation. Over time, you may begin complying before the threat is repeated. You stay silent, abandon boundaries, or remain in situations that feel unsafe because exposure seems worse than surrender. The secret becomes a cage. Healthy partners protect what you share, even during conflict or separation. They do not treat private information as property they can trade for control. Pay attention when confidentiality suddenly becomes conditional. Someone who values you will not use your most vulnerable disclosures to force agreement. Someone seeking power may threaten exposure because fear can keep you trapped long after trust, respect, and love have already disappeared. They damage your reputation to trap you. Your reputation shapes how others see you, trust you, and respond when you need support. That is why some controlling people attack it when they fear losing influence. They may spread rumors, reveal private details, exaggerate your mistakes, or tell selective stories that make you appear unstable dishonest, cruel, or dangerous. At first, the damage may be subtle. A friend becomes distant. A relative suddenly questions your judgment. Co-workers seem unusually cautious around you. You may not immediately realize that someone has been shaping how others interpret your behavior before you have a chance to explain yourself. The stories are often built from fragments of truth. They describe your emotional reaction, but hide the pressure that caused it. They mention your mistake while removing their own behavior. Because the account contains some real details, it can sound believable enough to spread. The darker pattern appears when reputation damage reduces your ability to leave. If friends distrust you, support becomes harder to find. If family believes you are the problem, they may pressure you to return. If coworkers or community members question your character, your financial and social independence may weaken. Over time, you may feel that nobody will believe you. You stop reaching out because explaining everything feels humiliating and exhausting. The person then becomes one of the few remaining sources of connection, even though they helped destroy the others. Healthy people may discuss conflict with trusted support, but they do not deliberately ruin someone's name to maintain power. They seek understanding rather than isolation. Pay attention when several people suddenly repeat the same accusations or seem to know private information. Someone who values fairness will not make your reputation the price of resisting them. Someone seeking control may damage how others see you because leaving becomes much harder when they have already convinced the world that you are the one who cannot be trusted. They use threats of harm to stop you leaving. Leaving a relationship should never require surviving fear. Some people respond to separation by threatening to hurt you, someone you care about, your belongings, or themselves in ways designed to make you stay. The threat may be direct, implied, or disguised as emotional desperation, but its purpose is the same: to make leaving feel more dangerous than remaining. At first, you may feel responsible for preventing a crisis. You postpone the breakup, answer every call, or return after creating distance because you fear what could happen if you refuse. Your concern becomes the force holding the relationship together. The darker pattern appears when the threats increase whenever they sense you becoming independent. They may say something terrible will happen if you leave, blame you for what they might do, or demand immediate reassurance. The relationship is no longer sustained by mutual choice. It is maintained through fear and emotional captivity. Over time, you may feel completely trapped. You stop discussing separation, hide your plans, and remain constantly alert to their mood. Even when you recognize the manipulation, the possible consequences can make resistance feel impossible. Healthy partners may experience intense pain when a relationship ends, but they do not use threats to remove your freedom. Their emotions remain their responsibility, and your safety and right to leave still matter. Treat threats seriously without accepting personal responsibility for controlling the person's actions. Involve a trusted adult, family member, counselor, emergency service, or appropriate local authority when danger seems possible. Do not handle an escalating threat alone. Someone who values you may struggle with loss, but they will not make fear the price of your freedom. Someone seeking control may use threats because terror can keep you present after love, trust, and consent have disappeared. They destroy things, block exits, or drive dangerously. Violence does not begin only when someone touches you. Destroying objects, blocking a doorway, punching walls, throwing belongings, or driving recklessly during conflict can all be forms of intimidation. The message is often clear. They want you to feel what they might be capable of without saying it directly. At first, they may claim they were simply angry, overwhelmed, or unable to control themselves. They may insist that because they did not physically hurt you, the behavior should not be treated seriously. But fear does not become harmless just because the damage landed somewhere else. Breaking objects can show that anger is being used to dominate the room. Blocking an exit removes your freedom to leave. Dangerous driving traps you inside a moving situation where your safety depends on someone who is emotionally out of control. The darker pattern appears when these actions happen after you disagree, set a boundary, or try to end the conversation. The behavior is not only emotional expression, it becomes a warning that resistance may bring frightening consequences. Over time, you may begin changing your behavior to prevent another incident. You stop arguing, avoid certain subjects, apologize quickly, or stay physically close because leaving feels unsafe. Fear begins controlling choices that should belong to you. Healthy people can feel intense anger without trapping, frightening, or endangering others. They step away, communicate, and take responsibility for managing themselves. Pay attention to whether you feel free to leave during conflict. Someone who values you will never use physical space, property, or dangerous behavior to overpower your decisions. Someone seeking control may create fear around escape because once leaving feels unsafe, silence and obedience become easier to force. They intimidate you without touching you. Intimidation does not require physical contact. Some people use posture, silence, facial expressions, sudden movements, blocked space, lowered voices, or prolonged staring to make you feel unsafe without ever laying a hand on you. At first, the behavior may be difficult to explain. Nothing obvious happened, yet your body reacts. You become tense, your thoughts race, and you start choosing words carefully. The absence of touch can make you question whether the fear is justified. That uncertainty is often what gives intimidation its power. The person can frighten you while later denying that they did anything wrong. They may say they were only standing there, looking at you, or speaking firmly. Your fear is then presented as proof that you are dramatic or unstable. The darker pattern appears when intimidation follows resistance. You disagree, establish a boundary, ask a difficult question, or try to leave the conversation, and their entire presence changes. They move closer, stare silently, tighten their expression, or position themselves in a way that makes your next decision feel dangerous. Over time, you begin responding to signals before anything happens. A certain look makes you stop speaking. A change in tone makes you apologize. Their silence becomes enough to control the room because your mind already understands the warning. Healthy partners can feel angry without making you fear what might happen next. They do not use their body, voice, or physical presence to overpower your choices. Pay attention to what your body notices around them. Someone who values you wants conflict to remain emotionally and physically safe. Someone seeking control may intimidate without touching you because fear can produce obedience while leaving them enough distance to deny that they ever threatened you. They ignore refusal and keep pressuring you. A refusal should end the pressure. But some people treat no as the beginning of negotiation. They keep asking, arguing, pleading, guilt-tripping, becoming cold, or repeating the request until resistance feels harder than surrender. At first, the pressure may seem minor. They say you misunderstood, ask for one exception, or insist that the request is not a big deal. But each repetition sends the same message. Your answer matters only if it matches what they want. This can happen around time, money, privacy, physical affection, social plans, personal information, or major decisions. You may explain your reasons clearly, yet they continue searching for the argument that will weaken you. The goal is no longer understanding, it is exhaustion. The darker pattern appears when they change tactics after each refusal. Kindness becomes disappointment. Disappointment becomes guilt. Guilt becomes anger. Anger becomes silence. They keep shifting emotional pressure until one method finally works. Over time, you may stop saying no directly because you already know what will follow. You delay answering, make excuses, or agree before you are ready simply to avoid another exhausting confrontation. Your consent becomes something they wear down rather than something you freely give. Healthy people may feel disappointed by a refusal, but they still respect it. They do not require endless explanations or punish you for maintaining your decision. Pay attention to what happens after you say no. Someone who values you may ask once for clarity, then accept your boundary. Someone seeking control will keep applying pressure because they do not view refusal as a final answer. They view it as resistance that can be broken with enough persistence. They treat fear, silence, or exhaustion as consent. Consent must be clear, willing, informed, and freely given. Fear, silence, freezing, confusion, or exhaustion are not permission. Yet some people take advantage of moments when you feel too frightened, overwhelmed, or tired to resist and later claim that you agreed because you did not clearly stop them. This creates a dangerous distortion. They focus on the absence of a strong refusal while ignoring the absence of genuine willingness. They may say you stayed quiet, did not leave, stopped arguing, or eventually gave in. But surrender under pressure is not the same as freely choosing something. Fear can make a person freeze or become unable to speak. Exhaustion can make continued resistance feel impossible. Silence may come from shock, uncertainty, intimidation, or the belief that saying no will create worse consequences. A respectful person notices hesitation and stops instead of treating vulnerability as an opportunity. The darker pattern appears when they intentionally wear down your resistance. They repeat requests, ignore discomfort, become angry, create guilt, or keep pushing until you no longer have the energy to defend your boundary. Afterward, they describe your exhaustion as agreement and remove every part of the situation that made refusal feel unsafe. Over time, you may blame yourself for not resisting more strongly. You replay the moment and wonder whether remaining silent made you responsible. It did not. The responsibility belongs to the person who continued without clear, voluntary agreement. Healthy consent is active and reversible. Someone who values you checks that you feel safe, respects uncertainty, and stops immediately when willingness is unclear. Someone seeking control may treat fear, silence, or exhaustion as consent because acknowledging your discomfort would require them to stop, and stopping was never what they wanted. They punish you for setting boundaries. A boundary is meant to protect your well-being, not trigger punishment. Yet some people respond to limits with silence, anger, guilt, withdrawal, threats, or deliberate coldness. The moment you say no, ask for space, protect your privacy, or refuse disrespect, they make you pay emotionally. At first, the punishment may be subtle. They become distant, stop replying warmly, cancel plans, or act wounded. You may feel guilty and wonder whether the boundary was too harsh. But the real message is not that they are hurt. It is that your limits will cost you connection. This creates powerful pressure. You begin learning that peace returns only when you soften the boundary, explain it repeatedly, or abandon it completely. Their reaction trains you to associate self-protection with rejection. The darker pattern appears when the punishment changes form. Silence becomes anger. Anger becomes guilt. Guilt becomes threats. They keep testing which consequence makes you surrender fastest. Over time, you may stop setting boundaries at all. You tolerate behavior that hurts you because the aftermath feels worse than the violation. Your needs shrink while their access grows. Healthy people may feel disappointed by a boundary, but they do not punish you for having one. They communicate, ask questions, and respect that your comfort matters even when they disagree. Pay attention to what follows your no. Someone who values you will not make affection, safety, or peace conditional on surrender. Someone seeking control may punish every boundary because each limit reminds them that there are still parts of your life they do not own. They remember your reactions more than your words. Some people listen to understand you. Others watch to discover how you can be controlled. When someone remembers your emotional reactions more clearly than the words you spoke, they may be studying what affects you rather than caring about what you meant. They notice which questions make you nervous, which jokes make you defensive, which silences make you apologize, and which disappointments make you surrender. While you believe the conversation has ended, they may be storing your reactions as a private map of your emotional pressure points. This signal is difficult to recognize because it can initially resemble attentiveness. They remember that criticism makes you over-explain, distance makes you chase reassurance, and anger makes you abandon your boundaries. Instead of using that knowledge to protect your feelings, they begin using it to shape your behavior. During conflict, they may repeat a phrase that previously unsettled you. When they want attention, they may become cold because they know silence frightens you. When you resist a demand, they may appear disappointed because guilt has worked before. Over time, your reactions teach them which emotional buttons produce the fastest results. The darkest part is that you may start blaming yourself. You think you are too sensitive, too anxious, or too difficult without realizing that someone has learned how to trigger those emotions deliberately. Healthy partners remember your feelings so they can avoid hurting you. Manipulative partners remember them so they can recreate the reaction whenever it becomes useful. Pay attention to what happens after you reveal a vulnerability. Does the person become gentler with it, or does that same weakness mysteriously appear in later arguments? Someone who truly values you will protect the parts of you they understand. Someone seeking control will memorize them. They quietly test which boundaries you defend. A boundary is rarely destroyed in one dramatic moment. More often, it is tested through small actions that seem too minor to confront. Someone may arrive late without explanation, read your private messages, make a joke at your expense, pressure you after you say no, or repeatedly interrupt your personal time. They are not always acting carelessly. Sometimes, they are watching closely to see what you will tolerate. The first test is usually subtle enough to create doubt. You may wonder whether you are overreacting or being too sensitive. If you remain silent, laugh nervously, or forgive the behavior without addressing it, they learn that this boundary is flexible. The next violation becomes slightly larger because your previous response showed them there may be no real consequence. This pattern becomes dangerous when the person respects boundaries only after resistance. They may stop temporarily when confronted, then test the same limit again in a different form. They are measuring whether your no is permanent or simply an obstacle that can be weakened through guilt, persistence, affection, anger, or exhaustion. Healthy people may cross a boundary accidentally, but they listen when corrected. They do not repeatedly search for loopholes. A manipulative person treats your limits like locked doors, testing every handle until one opens. Each unchallenged violation teaches them how far they can move into your emotional space. Pay attention to their reaction when you become firm. Do they respect your decision, or do they mock, debate, punish, or pressure you? The boundary itself often reveals less than their response to it. Someone who values you may feel disappointed, but they will still respect your limits. Someone seeking control will treat your boundary as a challenge to defeat. They share secrets. Early to create false closeness. Deep personal disclosure can feel like trust, but sometimes it is used to create intimacy before real trust has had time to grow. A person may reveal painful memories, family problems, past betrayals, or private fears soon after meeting you. The intensity makes the connection feel rare, almost as if you understand each other on a level others never could. This can create emotional pressure. Once they share something deeply personal, you may feel expected to do the same. You begin revealing your own wounds because withholding them now feels cold or unfair. In reality, closeness built through rushed disclosure can bypass the slower process of observing character, consistency, and respect. The danger is not simply that someone opens up quickly. Some people are naturally expressive or lonely. The real signal appears when early secrets are used to create obligation. They may suggest that you are the only person they trust, that nobody else understands them, or that your bond is already more meaningful than relationships that have existed for years. This emotional speed can weaken your judgment. You may ignore contradictions because the connection feels special. You may excuse disrespect because you know their painful history. You may remain loyal because leaving feels like abandoning someone who trusted you with their darkest experiences. Manipulative people sometimes use vulnerability as a shortcut. They reveal enough pain to appear genuine, then use the closeness to gain access, sympathy, loyalty, or forgiveness. Later, they may treat your own disclosures as emotional leverage. Healthy intimacy develops through time, mutual care, and consistent behavior. Secrets alone do not prove safety. Pay attention to whether the person respects your pace, accepts your privacy, and behaves reliably after the emotional moment passes. Real closeness grows steadily. False closeness often arrives intensely, demands loyalty quickly, and leaves you emotionally committed before you truly know who you are trusting.